call to order this budget workshop, 9:02 a.m. Go into silence, please. Drew?
Yes, sir. Pray with me if you'd like to. Father, thank you for giving us a new day to live. Help us to live it rightly, and to enjoy each moment. Appreciate each moment that we are alive. Certainly, the budget is probably the biggest thing the council does in setting policy. So really pray for wisdom for council, for staff, in doing this process, to be thorough and mindful, and would have your insight. Pray in your name. Amen.
Mr. Durham, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the March 1st, 2022 regular minutes?
Make a motion.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, so we have a hard stop at 12 noon today. I don't think we'll go to 12, but we've got the Salem Water Line groundbreaking at 2 p.m., so we'll break at 12 if we go that far. One note, as the budget process continues, it's each councilman's responsibility to make an appointment with the county administrator to go over any budget line questions that the councilman has. Any Oconee County citizen that has budget line questions should make an appointment with the county administrator to go over those budget line questions. Ms. Brock?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of our Budget and Administration Committee. We have a lot to cover today. I do want to pick up where we left off from our previous budget meeting. I hope that you had ample time to review the county council priorities so that we can make a determination on the prioritized list of council's wishes for funding in the upcoming budget. I don't know if y'all want to go through these line by line one more time, or if y'all want to just bring them up as a matter of vote, at your pleasure, obviously. These matters, if you want to go over just the numbers again as a refresher, if that would be helpful for everyone, I'd be happy to do that as well. We have a lot of documentation attached to it this time related to operational cost and salary costs. This was paper footnote to the back of it. Dick, you're welcome to have a copy. Riley, you want a copy?
I think we ought to go with the ones that could cost us money in the budget.
Okay, absolutely.
For instance, the roadway infrastructure, I think we've got a plan there,
Yes.
but it's not going to cost any additional funds.
So at this time, as I stated before, we are adequately funded on the county side and on the CTC side. Now, council did request, and the budget committee did request, that we get the funds that we receive from the state and the state expenditures. These are the documents that I gave you at the previous council meeting. There's a missing item of information, and that was the gas tax collected in Oconee County by the state. We requested this information from the DOT. A few days later, the DOT responded back that we would need to contact the Department of Revenue. We have contacted the Department of Revenue for this. We do not know if this is separate between the gas and diesel. Once we get that information, again, we'll bring back to you. But as far as the county budget goes, I do not recommend any increases. We created 2 designated separate capital millage accounts several years ago, one for bridges and culvert and one for road maintenance. Both of those have, thus far, adequately been funded for the requests that come in. Last year we completed more than 1,300 work orders through the road department. And we are in the final steps of the application on our website for submitting issues, roadway issues that will be linked directly to GIS. So one, you can find it on a map. Two, if you have your location turned on, it can ping where you are. We are working diligently on that. We hope to have that live on the website within the next 2 weeks or so. So the roadway infrastructure, as far as county funding, our recommendation is to maintain the current operational cost and maintain that millage designation for the capital.
Any questions on that one? Okay, so the wages, employee salaries, so that will cost us more in the budget, so.
It does. We have on your backup sheets first, so the wages and the new position request kind of go hand in hand because the wages will be impacted by the approval of the positions. So if you can pull the sheet that looks like this, it's in the packet of materials that you have. It should be in that first top page. I need a pair of glasses for Pete's sake. There was a priority by all 5 council members for the admission of deputies. I've got a pair, thank you. There were 3 deputy requests, corporal to sergeant for an SRO, a corporal to sergeant for PACE, and 2 requests for conversion from part-time to full-time employees. We felt the part-time community outreach coordinator could wait 1 year, provided that we were able to prioritize the law enforcement side. And on that, the number 533, which is on your left, it was determined the funding for the investigator to full-time was a priority of council as well. As you know, as the deputies come into the law enforcement field, from time to time, there's areas for those deputies to move from a deputy 1 to a deputy 2. And obviously, you would want some room for there not to be compression. So if the positions we can discuss first, that would give us direction on where we're going with the wages, because as you see, this does have a $600,000 impact. And these positions are without any wage increases that we are proposing also. So we'll just go down this list to make sure. If y'all want to vote, I don't know how, if you want to vote on all or one, or you want me to go down the list and explain, I'd be happy to do that. I feel like I've covered the sheriff's division pretty well. Any questions there? Okay, moving on to code enforcement. This was the 2nd year that we were directed to put a code enforcement officer in. As you well know, I came to council and said that we had previously posted a temporary but full-time position, and to date have had only one person interested in doing so, and after interviewing, determined he did not want the position. Adding a code enforcement officer to assist Gabe Hernandez, our current code enforcement officer, allows for Gabe to go into more remote and what could be considered security compromised situations without having to utilize an additional law enforcement officer with him. I think that when they go to safer areas to do code enforcement and assist citizens with the enormous amount of debris or garbage or living situations, that they could divide and conquer, and that we could handle those caseloads at a quicker rate and more efficiently. The clerk of court has taken over all general sessions dockets. This is the first time there's been a position request in the clerk of court's office in more than 8 years. I talked to the Madam Clerk yesterday. Because of the responsibility of taking over the general sessions dockets, an additional court clerk is needed. She said that the caseloads that they previously were not responsible for have increased about 140%, and they simply don't have adequate staff to get those dockets prepared so that the trials may go on, which helps the solicitor and the public defender, because those things are all cogs in the judicial wheel. The park ranger position is for Shaw-Ram County Park. Currently, that is a temporary and full-time position, as we noticed that the parks have exploded in activity in the last 2.5 years really, but more so after the impacts of COVID, that park ranger position is vital to the operation of Shaw Ram. The emergency dispatcher is for the 911 communication center. Last year, council approved 2 positions for that. This one position allows for there to be full shifts and not have to have the part-time floaters come in or overtime in excess for the 911 operations center, which does handle calls 24/7, 365, as you know. The 3 firefighter positions are within the fire plan. These 3 positions will help cover a full battalion shift in areas of the county where we have county employees in volunteer stations, so that the volunteers are not required to be in a station 24/7. And procurement has requested a buyer. As the county has developed and procurement and oversight has become increasingly strenuous, there are only 2 people in the county procurement office now doing RFPs, RFIs, managing an oversight of all county purchases and administration of all of our P cards, as well as cell phones, iPads, etc. An additional person in there is needed desperately. The total for all the positions, which I believe there are 13 of them here, including your fringe, now this does not include any wage increases that we'll be discussing shortly, is $600,986. Would y'all like to talk about these positions individually, separately, as a group?
Anybody?
Yes, sir. So the firefighters for the extra battalion, what tells us that we need that? Like what data says the call volume? And what's the volume of fires versus medical calls? I mean,
So these firefighters are also medics. I should have said that, I'm sorry. So they're cross-trained. So the call volumes in certain areas of the county have increased and the response time has decreased because of the lag time it takes for a response. Having the firefighters cross-trained means that it doesn't matter what the call is for. I'm going to use an example here. So this is an app. It's called Active 911, and it tells you who is responding when and where. So this morning, there was a motor vehicle collision on, it does give an address. I won't give the number, but it's on South Highway 11. In the morning, most of our volunteers either have other jobs or coming or going, probably like you working third shift, I heard. So we had 2 counties employees dispatched before a volunteer station was even toned. Those calls are in a prioritized order through the 911 communication center, and the dispatch is for who is nearest quickest. So the medical response side, as we've seen with the operations down in the lower portion of the county, we have a lot more cardiac arrest calls in a certain, what the Prisma EMTs in Coney County has discovered as a dead zone, which is why we currently have the Prisma EMTs at South Union, because they do gauge those call volumes with where people need to be, or, of course, we're anticipatory. You can go and look at data, but you're anticipating what's coming next, and that data may change in 2 weeks. But we do go on previous data and determine where there are zones of low or lag response.
I got some sort of counter to that. Of course, I'm a third person, but Mr. Davis seen it firsthand, according to one of the fire chiefs, that when they had a school bus wreck, and Mr. Davis can tell you more about this than I can, that the volunteers were there way before the paid people were there. That's
And that
what,
may be one of the cases for us to place another paid person in a volunteer station in a specific area.
you could ask Mr. Davis, he can tell you about it, because one of the fire chiefs said that Mr. Davis was keeping time on what type of response we were getting from our
Right.
full-time employees.
That's not exactly how that happened. And I don't know who all was there. That was the response that one of the fire chiefs gave me to make sure that because I wanted to make sure to talk about those that were there in the primary response. From that standpoint, Crossroads was the primary response was there, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 minutes after the call came in from 911. So I didn't sit down and write that down till afterwards, so I didn't keep time on that stuff, so, anyway, but, I think the response that what we're seeing across is continuing to improve. What was discussed after everything kind of got, cleared up was, the decline in volunteers, and that's not just in Oconee County, it's nationwide. And that the, paid staff that we have, although there is some hiccups and issues that we have at times, has helped with consistency, especially during the training, because the unfortunate part about it is the amount of training that is required is very difficult for a volunteer to be willing to accept that. You know, it's honestly, for the volunteers we have out there, what, you know, continue to be an amazing group, but I mean, you think, go back, 20 years ago, and it was all volunteer, so, right? I mean, there's probably some paid, but I mean, it was a lot of volunteer
20?
staff. So,
Maybe had to.
you know, so I think as we continue to look forward to that, and it's unfortunate the times that we're kind of in, but, you know, time is money for a lot of these people, but it doesn't change their heart is in fire, and their heart is in helping people, and you know, when we create jobs like this, it not only encourages people to get into the fire, but it also assists with paying their time. So a lot of them have several other jobs, as you know. So, you know, that's the main thing that I think we look at is, as we move forward in building these fire stations and staffing them properly, that does drastically improve, you know, people's response time. So, and also those that were just the volunteers that couldn't do anything if they were having to drive the truck. So sometimes getting the truck to the scene is the main issue, and I know we've worked on that, and the times have gone down drastically, and they've done a remarkable job in getting to places quicker. Some issues that was noted, that I got some phone calls afterwards, was dispatch, how dispatch sends people out to a call, what the tone is, the amount of people involved in it, and the size of whatever it is, so they know that what the proper response is. So, that is kind of one of these things, as we get some consistency on that dispatch call, to make sure that there's knowledge of what they're actually going to and how many people is needed to go to that.
Second thing on this, when we started hiring these people full-time and they started going to these outside our substations, they had a job load that they were supposed to be doing. They would, I don't know exactly what they were checking safety. And it seems like now that the full-time people have sort of sloughed off of that. They don't really care to do that. The volunteers ought to be doing this so that they can, I don't know exactly what they do, but we're talking to one of the chiefs, and they're gonna charge the $20,000 to each one of those facilities for this job that they are supposed to perform, that we're paying them to perform.
Mr. Hart, if I can talk about the charging, there's no provision that we charge any of our volunteer or member stations. There's not any provision in which we do that.
Well, you might need to get one of the fire chiefs up here and let him tell you what they've told him, okay? Because he told me directly.
He's welcome to come.
Well,
I don't know which chief it is, but anybody's, these are open and public meetings. I want to reiterate, though, it seems like there's some contention about the fire, that any of our hired fire, paramedic, EMTs, they're there to support and work with. not in competition. It's not a competition. That has to be made clear to all of our volunteer and member stations, including our city stations where we currently pay out contracts. This should be something for citizen response and emergency response to citizens. There's no competition. Now, I do understand sometimes that the first battalion or first highest ranking person on the scene is that command officer, and there may be some friction sometimes just because it's an adrenaline situation. But these are not competitive with any volunteer station. These are there to support our volunteer stations and hopefully keep our emergency response and our ISO at a level 4. 20 years ago, when we didn't have the county members and the substations, countywide ISO was a 7.
Well,
Today, your countywide ISO is a 4.
I had one of the fire chiefs tell me that if a full-time employee was there from 8 to 5, he said, and there's a fire, he's gonna be there by himself because the volunteers are not gonna follow him to the fire. Now, that is several different, fire chiefs have told me that.
So for these 3 additional fire positions, I mean, there should be data that backs up added them. You know, the call volume, the response time, that should all be available. I think we all should be able to review that going forward. I appreciate the sheriff for his positions. He provided information and studies for population and what's recommended for law enforcement, but we just need to see the data that supports adding each one of these positions.
We can provide that. I can have that, if y'all wouldn't mind, we can even have, are we allowed to do that, Mr. Can we have a budget discussion at a regular council meeting?
I mean, put it on the
So we'll
agenda.
bring that data back at the next council meeting, if y'all want to exclude those 3. We're just simply looking for some direction on how to build and create a budget.
And of course, so the dispatcher that's currently filled with part-time roles filling in,
So this one is not a current role.
Okay.
We will keep the part-timers, but for us to have a consistency of the number of dispatchers per shift, and Sheriff, you're here, right? So they need an X number per shift. Right now, we do have part-timers filling in because we don't have X number per shift. But the part-timers are limited to 29.5 hours. And we need that extra position so that we have a full, is it 3 or 4? Okay.
so I guess what I'm looking at is we're already paying somebody to fill that role on a part-time basis, whether it be 2 or 3 people rotating. I mean, is that numbers calculated into this? Because it doesn't look like it should be a full extra, $50,000 if we're already paying.
Right.
That role to be
So I guess the kicker there and what drives our data when it comes to the recommendation of adding positions, and I don't have all this available to you, I'm sorry, but I do have the sheet and I'm happy to pass it around and share it. The actual cost for overtime in the 911 Communication Center in 2021 was $108,000. You can decrease that overtime by adding a position and decrease the number of overtime hours that are required, because you're going to get burnout. Because these are 12-hour shifts. I'd be happy to show you their actuals for their overtime in the past several years. It is the second column down. I apologize, I don't have all this on paper. I mean, I have it on paper, obviously, but it's that second column down.
I think
I
on the
just-
dispatcher, the issue,
So
there
we're
is some
hoping
cost
what'll happen,
savings that
and
come
we'll
along
see
with
here,
it.
is we're recommending to
But
cut
the
that overtime
Consistency,
because it's been so high.
Yeah.
So adding a position, we've reduced the overtime. I mean, sometimes you're looking at the same amount of money, but you're also looking at providing employees the ability to have some sort of
Could you-
quality of life outside of work.
Could you come back to us with how much overtime will be saved?
Well, it depends on when we fill the position. We've tried to run those calculations, but based on this year, which goes into the whole wage conversation, it's very difficult to fill positions. very difficult. I'd love to tell you that we would be able to cut the overtime by 40%, 50%. But if we don't fill the position, then we don't know how much overtime is gonna be cut.
Well, we're talking about a couple of different things. The consistency on adding a full-time position assist, but when, you know, you look on overtime across from deputies, some of the hours firefighters are putting in, volunteer and paid, it's because of the amount of calls coming in. And, you know, in discussion with, you know, some fire chiefs and, you know, county emergency services, the amount of calls that we're receiving is up substantially the last 5 years. And if you don't get these guys in, get them trained up and get them ready, we're just gonna be, you know, well behind the time. You know, on the deputy side of things, that's simple. You know, we probably need 6, 7, but it's difficult. On the firefighter, we at least need 3, we probably need 4 or 5, but you can't, it just doesn't work to go and throw them in. It doesn't work to throw 5 or 6 people in, 5 or 6 employees in. That's some of the issues that we're having within the fire stations with a paid staff and some of the volunteer staff. And you know, Glenn, I don't discount what you're saying about that, but I totally disagree that if there's a fire, that they're not gonna respond to it because somebody's there.
How many fire chiefs would you like to tell you that?
Can I finish talking? Then I'll allow you, I won't interrupt you.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so, and if that's occurring to where we're not going to fires because a station's there or a person is going there, then that's unfortunate. The whole reason for the fire plan that was drawn up and is to assist and work together. Not everybody's gonna love each other, not everybody's gonna be happy all the time, but it has drastically improved consistency and given, you know, these guys that have volunteered their lives to go in there and it wears them out. I understand that, and it's frustrating. But, you know, when you work in businesses, you're gonna have people that you come in and work with you that you don't agree with. You don't like the way that they do things, and sometimes it becomes a little battle on who's actually in control. And that's the things that we're continuing to work through. And it's gonna have its hiccups, and it's gonna have, but it doesn't mean that you just quit it. It doesn't mean that you don't, you know, plan for the future, because if y'all don't think we need, you know, nobody said that we don't need any more new deputies, but if y'all don't think we, you know, don't need to keep increasing pay to our employees, keep adding, you know, firefighters for what we're, you know, this area is growing. And, you know, this council, and it's been said, we are a fix-it council. And if we sit back and ignore it, I don't know who's gonna be here in the next 4, 8 years or 1 year. But if we sit back and continue to ignore it, I know it's spending money, but that's, all of our jobs up here is to spend the money wisely and properly. And, you know, we're doing that. We're headed in the right direction. We're trying to raise pay to keep employees. We're focused on deputy pay. We're focused on fire and safety. That's where the majority of our money goes. And, you know, we're heads and tails above a lot of other areas that have not done this. And I'm proud to sit on here and vote for raises and vote for this pay stuff, even though some people call it, oh, it's not conservative, or, you know, somebody says that we're spending way too much money. But, you know, I'm doing what I know is the right thing to do.
Mr. Chairman, to your point, one of the fire chiefs told me to look at South Union, that they don't have any volunteers to come out when the fire alarm goes off. The people have quit using their radios.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Brock. So Mr. Davis mentioned 5-year call volume increase. So that should be a good starting point for the data to review so we can make the decisions based on facts and data, not hunches and gut feelings.
I've just texted my assistant to see if she would bring me my annual report book. That data may be in that book from Communications Dispatch. The fire data, since it comes in from 17 member stations and 4 cities, that we can have at the next meeting. I can provide you the fire calls that come through dispatch, but I may not be able to break them down per district that way, per fire district that way. Thanks, Brad. And I'd rather provide you with the most accurate information that we could instead of just saying, here's 80,000 calls, I'm not sure where they went. If you'll allow us just that little bit of time for that, I would not hesitate to provide that information. I'm just gonna check real quick to make sure that I don't already have that in my public safety data numbers.
While you look that up, I just want to say kudos to the 911 folks, because when I go to cut my Apple cell phone off, you have to wind it here, and below that is a emergency call. And I made a mistake and did the wrong one, and I immediately hung up, and 2 seconds later, my phone rang, and it was 911, and the lady stayed on the line for a minute to make sure I wasn't under duress or in harm's way, and I really, really appreciate that. I wasn't a test. I wasn't testing. I hung up real quick because I didn't want 911 to come. So our 911 folks do a great job. So kudos
They are,
to
and it's
them.
a very stressful job. I realized from the budget meeting that it's one of those jobs that where you're always on the front end of a crisis and you never get to see the completion or the success of how it turned out. So they carry around a lot of stress. Shortly after the tornado, when we were assembled in downtown Seneca at the fire station, we had a mobile 911 communications center there, and as you can imagine, there were like 2,100 calls in a matter of hours that night. And after we realized, sadly, one death, that 99% of the people were alive and well, despite having endured a late night in the dark EF3 tornado. The dispatchers kept coming up to us and asking, what happened to the lady at 111 Paloma? What happened to, because they took all this information in. And when you're calling 911, you're not calm and rational and factual on the other end. Something terrible is happening. So it occurred to me to put them in my car and drive them around to let them see the children playing on the fallen trees and the number of people cleaning up their own yards. And I'm not going to call any names. But 2 of those dispatchers were in full-fledged tears because they got to see some moment of closure. And it didn't hit me that what they take in when they pick up that phone. Now, yes, they are trained, and they are trained out the game. They're trained to the point. I've just pulled those records for you. 97.1% of all 911 calls are answered in 10 seconds or less. So you've already got a response in the first 10 seconds of being able to call for help. And when people call for help, it's not, I got in a car wreck and I'm fine. Sometimes it's my husband's on the floor and I can't get him up. Well, they take the medical calls, we also do the 911 for emergency or medical dispatch. So there's a lot that goes into their training, but they're still human beings. So I do believe that having a resource for them to have quality of life. And when I talk about those overtime numbers, one, we can talk about it as a budget figure, but what we're really talking about is someone who could have left at 7 o'clock this morning, but because the shift was shorthanded, is probably still sitting there right now taking those calls. They need to be out. They need to be able to walk out of that 911 communications center and have a quality of life and shake it off, so to speak, so that they're refreshed and ready to come back in and be the professionals that we require of them.
And we talk about how important the sheriff deputies are. Sheriff deputies can't respond to anything if we don't have a good 911 department, right? Because most of the calls for the sheriffs is going to 911.
And your dispatchers are checking on your deputy's safety when they're on a call. They have systems in place. Say if they have someone on a CDB and they hear a couple of clicks on a radio. They'll do a roll call real quick and make sure that every person on that shift, if you hear a click, that means somebody has hit their mic. It can happen in any course of physical movement because of the amount of equipment officers wear. But that dispatch center will put it as a top priority to make sure that every officer on shift does a roll call back in. Because if you hear a click, you don't know who it is. They consistently check on officer safety. I think traumatizingly, the 2 vehicular accidents involving deputies in the past 6 months, there were a lot of congrats and kudos going back to the 911 dispatchers, because it's very difficult for them to hear these things while they're live online with an officer who has just been in an accident. So the officer safety, obviously their number 1 priority is answering and dispatching, but the officer safety is in that top priority as well. The increase in calls, I see a percentage, but I don't see a number here. I'd be happy to provide that number. I'm making myself some notes on things to follow up with.
Ms. Brock,
Yes, sir.
you mentioned $100 and some odd thousand in overtime for dispatch. Can you give us the number of hours of overtime as well? I think that's important as we think about the situation that these folks are in, working a 12-hour shift and then
Yes,
continuing
probably.
that. I mean, roughly, you know.
Well, that's a number we'd have
Have
to
to be
back
exact.
into, but yes, I can.
I'm just thinking about the toll that could take on a person. Thank you. I don't need it right
No,
now.
absolutely. I won't be able to provide that today. We'll have to go run all the employees and then back into an overtime number for those.
Sounds good.
But it's not impossible. I just can't do it right now.
Well, I mean, it's just, I think, we're talking about the budget, but
No, I understand.
overtime means that somebody worked a longer shift
Correct.
in that
And they
specific
still have to come
position.
back in tonight at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, that's a
Regardless of what
heck
time
of
they
a,
left this morning.
they need some decompression time.
They do.
I think that's the question too, is how do they feel overtime? Do they feel overtime by staying over and coming in early, or do they feel an additional shift?
Think, the sheriff, can you answer that? Do you mind me asking the sheriff for his input?
There are probably some of both. You know, if employee at 6 o'clock this morning calls in sick, you know, is not able to make it into work.
Yeah.
We may have someone stay over until someone else can get there. And it may be that, a scheduled vacation, obviously, we wouldn't have that person stay over. We would already have scheduled the part-time person to come in and fill in. So it's some of both.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And
Yeah.
if we're done with fire and police, I did want to talk about a few of the other positions.
Sure.
Does anybody- On the code enforcement, one thing I wanted to touch on that, if y'all are familiar, I think, last presentation was a good one, but I have kind of followed along with code enforcement over the years, not just here, but other places. And, you know, when code enforcement is done properly, it's not an attack on a residence. Code enforcement is used to lower crime in specific areas. Blighted properties, a lot of times, those that no one is living in, or a person's not supposed to be living in. And so, when I define code enforcement, that's one of the number 1 priorities is safety, and safety of those around. And that's why I've, continually been in favor of, pushing to have additional enforcement on there. Mr. Gabe was, it's a tough job. I mean, what he's talking about is he's not walking up to a place to just say, oh, hey, you got a car down in your yard. That's not what we're after. That's not what I'm after. I'm after crime areas, and I think if you really looked into what has happened here and what has happened in other areas, when these properties get ignored and burned out, half fallen in, people take up residences, and it's not really, in my personal opinion, it's not the citizens of Oconee County that's taking up residence, it's criminals coming in there, finding a place to harbor. And it constantly happens in these areas. That's my push for, code enforcement and what the attack should be. It's not on, your, Oconee County resident because he's got 2 cars in his yard. We're a place where a lot of us have cars that we work on and things that we work on in our yard. That's not what this is after. This is after, burned out properties, abandoned properties, properties that are unsafe, properties that I've seen kids come in and out of because it's fun to play in, or they think it's fun to play until somebody gets hurt. They've burned 3 or 4 times. How in the world these houses burn when we put them out and then they burn again, it blows my mind. But that to me is my push on code enforcement. It's not pushing down on the citizens. It's another way to fight crime, and it is a great way to fight crime and future crime. Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I agree with Mr. Davis's comments there. I've spoken with a number of law enforcement folks over the past few years, specifically talking about Utica and what we can do over there to try to cut down on crime. And they've told me time and time again, I ask them pointedly, does code enforcement assist with reducing crime? And they say yes, because it removes the environment where, those activities, those criminal activities can take place. You take away where somebody can hide out, do drugs, manufacture drugs. You remove the environment for that activity, and it makes, it's one less place for them to hide. I don't know if any law enforcement's willing to come speak on the record about that, but I have spoken with them, and they have confirmed that it is helpful to law enforcement. One other thing, if the rest of council who's not on the Planning and Economic Development Committee has not watched that or didn't attend, I can't remember if y'all were, if Ms. Durham, Mr. Hart were here for that presentation by Gabe Hernandez, our only code enforcement officer. He said 60% of his calls or investigations, he has to go to the property with a sheriff's deputy. Either because it is a dangerous situation or because they need some backup, need another person there. And I think, and I would hope that an additional code enforcement officer would free up a sheriff's deputy to be on the road and not have to be taken off the road for code enforcement activity. It's not gonna fix every situation. There's always gonna be an instance where we need law enforcement presence in that situation. So I'm sure there's always gonna be a situation, but it would be good to have a second code enforcement officer who can provide some presence there so we can, get those sheriff's deputies freed up. But anyway, that's my thoughts on it. Thank you.
I do have one thing to add, if I may, sir, regarding the firefighters. So last Friday, we broke ground for the Bounty Land substation, which currently is in the City of Seneca contract area. I have not put city contracts on a budget discussion, but at some point, those will need to be reviewed as well. Call data is calls outside the city, inside the city. our reporting is inconsistent. I think that's the best way to put that. There could be a reduction in years coming because the Bounty Land Fire Slip Station currently sits within a contract area for a municipality.
I'd just like to highlight the fact that the outside auditor came in and pointed out to the public that last year, we spent 46% of our budget on public safety. And I don't have a problem with increasing that percentage because that's the number one priority in my life is safety.
Is there any further discussion about positions?
Yeah, I did have one I want to touch on the park ranger on Patrol Ends. Popularity has drastically grown in there. We've, through grants, got the expansion property of there. So it is moving towards, I know South Cove is one of those that's close to paying for itself. But there's a lot of things that we do that don't pay for themselves. And if we're gonna sit around and say, well, if it don't pay for itself, we're just gonna stop doing it, then I guess we might as well stop doing it. I don't know, 85% of the stuff that we do. Obviously, I push a lot for parks recreation, and this is one of them that I've continued to see huge improvements in, and just the amount of attendance in that area. I'm blessed to be able to travel different places for vacation, but what we have here, it's amazing the amount of people that live here, and this is their vacation, and the amount of people that travel hours and hours and hours to come and see and see what Oconee County has to showcase. And so the improvements that we've made, just the bathhouse over there has been huge. I've got a lot of calls on that, and how honestly we were so far behind on making great investments in our parks that, again, I'll call it the Fix It Council. That's what we're trying to do. So I definitely am in favor of keeping that park ranger. It's almost a necessity to make sure that that area continued runs, continue to be controlled, and I just wanted to touch base on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Any other discussion?
Just one more thing before we move on. I appreciate the sheriff providing data to justify the needs to that department, and we need to have firm data for each one of these other positions before we vote to continue to expand. Not against it, I'm just saying it needs to be justified.
Okay, so we're gonna move to the next one, which is sewer
Well, if I
expand.
may,
Okay, wait.
we'll need some direction to create a budget with.
I'll make a motion to approve the positions as stated, along with receiving other documentation as was recommended by council.
Second. Any discussion?
So we're approving it without firm data telling us this is what we need, that we need these additional positions.
I think
You're not approving anything. This is the initial start of the budget process.
Yeah, you're not approving the budget. And what Mr. Davis, you might not have heard it because it wasn't talking very loud, is he also said, and in his motion, and the information to come that's been requested. So this is not the end of it. This is just to continue to develop the numbers. We can change the numbers, but this is just to continue, but also get more information as you've requested, Mr. Durham.
Hey, Mr. Elliott, thank you, and that's absolutely accurate. I think probably the best way to put it, if I'm right, and what you would need, would be for, as these motions come up, to say, I move to include XYZ within the proposed budget. So obviously the council takes action on the budget, so at least Amanda knows what to put in that budget. So I think that's what she's looking for motions.
And just as a note, I appreciate you guys' consideration putting things in, because it's a lot easier for us to go and remove certain things upon council direction than it would be for us to figure out how to wedge something back into. Our goal is to have a balanced budget. Obviously, we have some information, but for us to be able to take things out of, just like removing items from an agenda is easier than adding to at a meeting. So I appreciate the consideration for what we need to be working with for these positions. And we'll be providing that data at the next council meeting. In fact, I may email it to y'all individually and then bring it up again for discussion at the next council meeting, so thank you.
Any other discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Just, this is not even the first reading of the budget. This is creation of the budget. There's a first, second, and third reading. When's
And a
first?
public hearing.
Well, I mean, the public hearings, we have two now.
Right.
All during there. So what you're working on today is to try to work on creating a budget and give some kind of guidance. If you decide later that we want to take this out, or we want to add another deputy in, or as, you know, right now, we're approving a salary on new deputies of $35,885. We've already discussed on moving that up to 40. Well, what I'm approving today is not approving salary of $35,885. I may move to, when we get into the first budget, to make it to 40. And that's what we're approving today. We're trying to give direction. What we're doing right now is not approving anything besides direction for the budget. That's first reading, second reading, third reading is when you're actually approving the budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Next item, sewer expansion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
May I go back?
Sorry?
May I go back?
Yes.
Thank you. So, the wages employees, the reason I put the positions first was because the sheriff's positions were a priority. But if we're going to add the positions in, then we need to go back and discuss the wages and employee salaries, because now we need to include the proposed positions into the discussion, which has an impact on what the wage and salary employee retention amount could be.
Okay, so let's do that then.
Okay, thank you so much, and I'm
Sure,
sorry.
sure.
I just want to make sure that when we are creating a budget, that we address each one of the council's priorities and try to plan accordingly with the available funds that we do have, or we anticipate. We do not have a balanced budget at this point, but we're getting close. Just as a note, in your handouts here, we did include as well salary and fringe, and then operations. This is for y'all's information, they're two separate. You'll see that one says operational costs and one says salary cost. That's just for information for y'all to see that our salaries and our operations are considerably low, because we don't create anything. We don't build anything. Well, we do blast rocks from time to time, but we don't make them, we just break them. But service is our product, so to speak. And I do want to say, as long as I've been sitting in this chair, even when I was interim, council has been very supportive of my request for employee wage increases. And we are still on the right track. If we just stand on the track facing the right direction, we're still going to get run over. I've made phone calls for our region and municipalities, cities, and looking at our current salary structure. One of our cities in the county is proposing an 8% increase. We cannot afford that. Just frankly, we can't afford 8. Another municipality is doing 5.6%. A third municipality is doing 6%. Our neighboring county is doing 5.7%, and our other neighboring county in South Carolina is doing 6.1%. This is an amazing and unusual time, coupled with a salary or wage, borderline, I don't want to say crisis, because I don't want to act like my hair's on fire, but coupled with the fact that we're looking at inflation across all of our supplies and materials. This is a very challenging time for the creation of an anticipatory budget, because the future is certainly uncertain, and we all know that. While we discussed during our strategic planning retreat a way for us to be able to attract, so the recruitment arm of our salaries, I'm going to pass out our salary table here, and if you do have your department sheets, the summary sheets for just salaries. Ms. Price and I have worked for a long time on this. When I say a long time, I mean a few years. I take it home with me on the weekends. I'm not asking y'all to adopt this. I'm not asking you to include this portion in the budget. But this is a step and scale model, typical to what you would find. You got bored. Typical to what you would find in a government agency of our size and structure, so that there may be some form of planning, one, for council, for budgetary purposes, but two, for employees who want to come work here. If you came to work here 4 years ago, you have no idea what your salary is going to be 4 years today. If you came here and said, okay, I plan on staying here for 20 years without a schedule, you may receive 1%, you might receive 4%, you might receive 2%. By amortizing that percentage across a scale, one, it does allow some stability. And two, this is what the recruitment and promotion process would look like. Because you're not going to be here in 5 years and have less skills. In 5 years, your skill level is going to increase. You're going to learn more about Oconee County, what we do and what we're about. Not asking y'all to adopt this, I'm just giving it to you as an idea. I'm not asking to include it in the budget, I'm just giving you an idea. What I am asking to include in the budget, however, or direction for us to consider inclusion in the budget, is a significant cost of living for this particular year, because as you all know, inflation is at a second record high. This chart here in the green, so on your white column is your current salaries per department, and at the bottom is your total. For the two green columns, one is a 5% cost of living increase, and that's a one-time, it's not an annual. Well, it goes on to annual pay. I meant 1 year. And then a 6%. And the reason that this was very difficult for us is because it seems like an enormous amount of money in some ways. But the true cost of having employees at Oconee County is in what we gain annually by retaining good employees. 4 years ago, I came to this council, y'all asked me what the cost of turnover was, and 4 years ago, that number was $387,000 in 1 year that we spent on turnover. The sheriff can probably verify, and then Ms. Hubbard can because she's got a vacant position as well. We can't recruit. It's very difficult to recruit people of quality and who want to work for the government. Public service is not for everyone. So recruitment is difficult. While considering the cost of living increase, I'd like to add that same cost of living increase to the proposed positions. Separate from cost of living, council and on the sheriff's recommendation challenged us to formulate a plan to increase the sheriff's deputies up to $40,000. So the 9 Deputy 1 positions increased to $40,000, and the 17 Deputy 2, Sheriff, am I reading that right?
Probably.
Okay. Is roughly 77,248 included in the request for the cost of living, and obviously this is up for discussion, but I want to include an additional $239,273, which we have found that we can afford to increase the cost for the entry wage for the law enforcement officers and allow for the sheriff to have his own method of the prevention of compression in between the ranking officers. Say, for instance, if you brought the deputy one up to 40, you can't leave your deputy two at 40. Your deputy two would need to go up to like 41,500. Well, once your deputy two goes up to 41,500, you don't want that person reporting to someone who is making 41,580. So there would be some compression in there. And that is entirely up to the sheriff, which is why I asked for the extra funds for him to evaluate his structure and create bigger gaps in between those ranks, so that there wouldn't be a low morale for those that were coming up from the bottom while the middle stayed in the middle. We have, in the past couple of weeks, had some difficulty, not just in recruitment, but in retention. So I've had 4 departures from our solid waste division in 3-week period because of wages. I have an email here, I don't want to say the person's name, but we do have outside agencies that help us do recruiting for certain positions. And the email simply says, I'm sorry, but I cannot recruit this position because the pay is not attractive. So when an employee walks into a recruitment or an employee agency, Oconee County jobs are not even presented because the pay is not competitive. They're not even presented to be filled. Now, we have, obviously, something that people can't see. We have a great culture. We have wonderful insurance. We have 13 paid holidays. We get sick and vacation time. The sad thing about all of those benefits is they cannot be monetized. You cannot convert your insurance to money to buy groceries. You cannot convert your retirement to money to pay rent with. The cost of living is expensive on the lower paid people. It's more expensive for those who make less, obviously, because there's less for them to work with, which is why we're asking for a one-time consideration. And we understand the magnitude of it, but we would like to be able to include in our formulation of the budget at least a 5%, if not a 6% cost of living for our employees.
So when we lose somebody, do we do an exit interview?
Yes, sir.
And who does the exit interview?
Typically the department head.
Shouldn't that be HR?
HR does them if it's not a good departure. But if the employee, I spoke with an employee yesterday who left us about a month ago. He left for $3 more an hour. He called me yesterday and was like, I hope you get the money you need. I hope you get the money you need, because the company he's working for, they're recruiting from our guys.
Well, the companies I work for, HR did it so that the person could be completely honest. Not their boss. They're not gonna be completely honest with the boss unless they got really beef with the boss.
I think people are honest when it comes to dollars. I think if the departure is a bad departure, we've had several departures where, the employee didn't want to speak to their department head. But 90% of the people who are leaving right now are leaving for money. And even at 6%, we're still not competitive with private. And I don't think we're ever going to be, and I don't know that that should be our mission. But we should not be losing to other governments. Because government skills are specific to government, because rules, regulations, policies, procedures, it's not the same as private. So we should not be cannibalized by another government. And it's worth driving, even with gas prices, it's worth driving 30 miles away for $3 more an hour for most of our staff. It's just a very difficult time for us to retain and recruit. Currently, we have open positions with 0 applicants for more than 30 days.
I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Brock. However, the public is suffering right now too. So we gotta remember, unless I'm told otherwise by the other council members, we're not gonna have a tax increase.
I'm not asking for one, sir.
Okay, I just wanna make sure that everybody understands that you're staying in that parameter, right?
We are staying 100% within that parameter. And I want to make sure that when we're talking about tax, that, tax is a dollar amount, millage is set on what the county dollar amount is, and Christie is still here. Would y'all want to talk 1 second about tax and millage?
I just wanna make sure that my property tax and everybody else's doesn't
So
go
the
up a penny.
valuation on your home may have an impact on your tax bill. But this budget does not increase any millage.
Mr. Chair.
But the reassessment will not affect my property tax bill in November of this year, right?
Correct, reassessment does, it
So
will impact your bill for next year, yes, sir.
For
You will get
2000,
your
in
valuation.
November 2023.
No. But none of the reassessment estimations are included in anything that we have discussed from today forward.
Okay, all I'm saying-
Or today.
All
going
I'm saying is I don't want the taxpayers, the property owners, to pay any more than they paid last year on their house.
The value of the mill is going to be different. But that
Okay.
is not due to reassessment. That is simply due to growth.
Okay, understand all that? A lot of people don't understand that language. What they want to know is your property tax bill going to go up in November?
I can't answer that.
Well, it can't. We're not going to let it, because everybody that gets paid low in the county, we also got people outside with property. That's their home. It may not be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it's their home, and they can't afford, when they're paying all this gas, all this food, everything else that's going up, another dollar on their property tax.
So I think what you're asking me to do is hold the value of the mill from last year so that the tax bills are exactly the same?
Yeah.
Is that a motion?
If
If that's the case, then.
I'll make it a motion.
Hold on just a
Sure.
second. Can we get some instruction on this from the auditor?
Sure.
Because I want to make sure that we understand the implications of this. If we have new investment in this county, I don't know,
We
somebody,
have growth.
right, somebody builds 100 houses in a
Correct.
subdivision, or somebody puts a manufacturing facility here, or somebody puts a shopping center here. They're creating additional value in Oconee County. They're increasing the tax base.
Correct.
That growth, and correct me if I'm wrong, I could be wrong, I could have misunderstood this for many years. That growth in the value of the mill will not impact, provided that the millage stays the same, will not increase my tax bill for my personal house. If the value of the mill grows from $550,000 to $560,000, does my,
Sorry, I'm asking about the value
Okay.
of the mill. Please keep talking.
because I think it's important that we're all operating from the same premise.
Yes.
For example, when we've gone through, since I've been on council, and I've got, I don't know, 70 or 80 plus tax bills that I've reviewed. Out of that, unless there's been a buy and a sell, but if you've bought a house, whatever that value is what the value that is recorded. So if my house says it's $170,000 and I sell it for $250,000, the next tax basis on that is $250,000. So that person will be paying more taxes based on that assessment.
No, they won't be paying more than that because it's a new owner.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It's a
But
new
what
owner.
I'm saying
Right.
is the value is determined by a lot. So we'll have a lot of houses that are bought and sold, and that new determination of the tax value will be, see there?
Yes,
That's what we-
our tax base should be growing just because all the turnover on the lake community, where.
That's correct.
Where a house that was worth $500,000 is going for $1 million now, it's crazy.
Correct.
I don't
But
understand.
the house that
But that's
did
what's
not
happening.
change hands.
So-
It did not
so-
change
May I?
Yes.
We're in a year of reassessment. Reassessment is going to be implemented this year.
Right.
The value of our mill is going to change. Our millage is going to change.
Right.
However, there is a calculation by law that I have to follow. We're going to take prior year dollars divided by current year assessment, less growth, to come up with a base millage. At that point in time, we can add growth in to make it grow or decrease, depending on what you approve on your budget. And then if for any reason whatsoever that you need more money, you also have the CPI inflation that you can use as well on the millage.
So when you calculate that, are you saying that you can pretty much calculate to keep my bill the same
first
dollar amount?
calculation, which is the prior year dollars, which
Right.
is the money that we're gonna collect in tax year 21, divided by the 22 base assessment.
Right.
That should level us out to where we were to begin with.
Okay.
Okay, and then at that time, we can look at the growth, because, you know, our real estate is growing tremendously here. So you could roll back millage a little bit more, depending on what you
Approved.
approve in this budget. And I think what she's trying to say is the things that you guys want to do that's on your capital plan and, you know, the possible employee raises or whatever is going to level out with our growth
Okay.
from what we currently are looking at now. When
Everybody
we've
understand
ran the numbers upside down, inside out, and it looks like it's going to level out to where hopefully there will not be an increase on anyone's tax bill unless they have sold, built a building, added a carport, or whatever. And, you know, and that's the growth on their individual.
Increase the value.
The value of their property,
itself.
yes.
Right, so if I live in a 1,000 square foot house, I haven't made any improvements to it,
The goal is for your property tax bill to be the same as it was last year.
thank you. Does everybody understand that?
Mr. Elliott, I think one of the things that's
Thank you.
sometimes gets miscommunicated is when we grow the budget, how the budget is grown. And it's grown by continued investment in this area. It's grown by, we had a lot of industry, housing projects and stuff come on. And, you know, a lot of the growth of the budget has been investment in our people and salaries, additional things, you know, without a tax increase. And even, you know, again, going back to when we had the tax increase, school resource officers was a huge one for that year. And it was, I think, a 2 mil tax increase. And I understand what people are faced with, because, you know, when you're running a business and you have employees and stuff like that, you're trying to make sure that you're paying them a fair wage, and it's expensive out there right now. And so I do continue to, you know, be on the same page with you and make sure that people aren't paying more. But when you're seeing the increase of values and people able to sell their homes, I mean, I think it really shows the resilience of this county and what we're doing. The low employment, was it still below
2.7%.
Yeah, and you're having the wages, they're increasing wages as well. So, you know, again, and I think this is the fourth time I say it, and I'll say it again, you know, fix. That's what we're doing and continuing to push forward. And again, we're sitting here today not to approve a budget, but to give, you know, recommendations moving forward. And we still have to continue to fight. And I know somebody said to me one time that when you come to work for the county, you don't come to work for the money. Man, that's a total false statement. I understand we're not a private partnership, private area.
Unless you're on county council.
Unless you're on county council. But at the same time, we have to look at it to go, we have years and years and years have passed by without raises. That's why we're so far behind. It's not this council sitting up here doing this. It happened because it's not the shiny penny to sit here and throw out money to employees. But it's the most important thing that you have. If we don't have employees, we might as well not even have an county. If we can't recruit people to work here, then, you know, what are we doing? And so, you know, if in 3 years, if I'm not here because we've increased the budget, and we've increased the budget for things like, you know, pay and employees and fire and police, so be it, because that's where we need to be. And, you know, I want to see it in there. I'm definitely on the page of the no tax increase, and I won't vote for a tax increase, but I definitely want to see as we move forward, because if we don't, when we get into the next year's budget, what are you going to do then? You're going to be 7-8% behind, maybe more. And a lot of these other counties that she's speaking of, they're having substantial tax increases. Several of them had it last year. We didn't because our council was smarter. We did have a small tax increase, but we have growth here. I don't care what people say, that there's no way we have this growth. Well, the numbers don't lie. The growth is here, and if we don't continue to do something, we're not even gonna have people that work here. We're gonna have all this growth, and then it is gonna be lawless. I heard that word used in the last council. It is. If we don't continue to look at this and focus on it, we're gonna have issues.
Yes, Mr. Strong.
Yes. Ms. Brock, you said we couldn't afford 8%, and then you said we couldn't afford 4%. So you sort of boxed us in, hadn't you?
I don't remember saying we can't afford 4%.
Well, I don't see it on the chart here.
The 4%?
Yeah.
I can include a 4% for review, absolutely. Our recommendation is 5 or 6%.
Okay, well, I just
Based
wondered,
on-
you know,
I don't remember saying 4%, and Mr. Hart, if I was talking fast, I may have said 4, but I meant 5.
I might have been listening wrong.
I just want to take 1 second too and say, and I really appreciate Christie coming up and talking. When we develop a budget, the very first things we do is look at our current real estate values in Oconee County, and I get with the auditor. I even called her at home yesterday because I was doubting myself. As many times as we've gone through it backwards and forwards and upside down, we want to make sure that what we put in front of you is something that you're comfortable with. And I want to make sure when you said no more dollars, because if there is an improved property and there is a permit pulled on that, then
Right.
it will be a change on there. But
Right.
if nothing changes, and the other part of the importance of this is our growth drives the demand for this growth. And while our census numbers may not look like that growth is what would constitute this sort of increase or some of the capital that we're looking at, our visitorship is at an all-time high. Our second homes are 26.2%. Primary residents, as far as real estate taxes go, I think primary residents pay 28.3 or 28.6, and second homes pay 26. So when we're talking about that growth, part of the drive for the necessity for us to make modifications and change is because of the growth. And that growth may not be reflected in our census numbers, but it's most certainly reflected in the need for services in Oconee County. And as a reminder, you know, the millage was dropped this previous year, the current year that we're in. That debt millage did go back. So in fact, we had a tax reduction in the current year we're in. And we do not anticipate a tax increase of any kind. And I want to make sure when we're talking about taxes that we understand the difference between tax and millage. Because I'm not trying to sell you a bill of goods. I want this to be 100% transparent and to make sure that everybody understands at least what we're talking about and when we talk about dollars versus mills and those two things being different. So no, the mill value is not, or the number of mills. We currently operate 63.9 for operations. And I even underestimated what Ms. Hubbard gave me, just to be on the conservative side. Because we want to make sure that it is as accurate as possible and that what we're asking for is based in fact and figures.
Mr. Norton?
Oh, yes, there's one thing I think this, as a council, we need to address. And if we're talking about employees and keeping up with pay, and it's something I received several phone calls on after the Journal posted the salaries. And I know the sheriff will never mention it, but if you look at the sheriff's salary compared to Mr. Roots, Ms. Brock's, and what the school district's paying administrators, and then at surrounding sheriff's salaries, I mean, it's awful. I mean, just be honest. And residents called me concerned, why is he paid so little? And God bless him for doing the job. But, I mean, that's something we need to address. I mean, because he is not within range.
I'll agree with Mr. Durham on that. I looked at that. We've got employees that are making somewhere within let's say $1,000 of the people that are elected to perform these duties, just like the treasurer. And I can't speak for Christie, 'cause I don't remember what her salary was, but still, we've got people, I won't name the names, but we got people that's making, $73,000 that are pushing a pencil
So
in
let
the
me-
different departments.
Let me address the treasurer, because I know it's been 25 years, longer than that, since I was a CPA auditing a county government. But back then, the treasurer of Spartanburg County got paid not only by the county, but he got paid by the state, too.
That's correct. The
didn't
auditor,
tell you that, did he?
treasurer, actually, most
No, I'm just
elected,
looking at what we pay him.
most elected officials get some sort of state stipend. I believe the auditor and treasurer, auditor, you're here, do you mind me talking about it? What is it, 20?
You've got to also remember what we do for the state as well.
I agree. I understand why the state pays y'all, because,
What's your,
yes.
y'all's number? 25?
23.
23. And the sheriff, I think yours is 1,575? So what the state contributes to certain elected officials is varied. I'm gonna champion for the sheriff for just 1 minute. That doesn't have to be included in next year's budget. Obviously, if we increase the salary immediately, then, and with the vacancies we currently have, blessing and a curse, there is funds right now in the salary line item to increase his salary beginning tomorrow, or the first day of the next pay period. That doesn't have to be in a next year budget discussion. That number can be assimilated in, and we can go ahead and bank on there being a certain amount of vacancies, even with council's consideration of 5 or 6%. We have enough vacancies right now to where thankfully we have an adequate amount in our leftover salaries that we anticipate utilizing for the increased need for fuel.
So let's make that an executive session item at the next council meeting.
Perfect. And I have a couple of other things to add to that.
It-
As a follow-up.
I don't mean to change the subject, but just to go back to readdress, and I appreciate Ms. Hubbard being here, to try to clarify reassessment. So if you got two houses right now that are assessed at $100,000, and one is reassessed at $110,000, it increased $10,000 in value, and then one is reassessed at $90,000, or decreased $10,000. I am assuming that the tax bill on each of those properties, though it may be exactly the same this year, is going to change. And one person's going to see a tax increase, and one's going to see a tax decrease, based solely on the value as assessed, not based on what council is adjusting the millage or increasing or decreasing the budget. And I think that's important for the general public to understand that that's out of our control. We cannot, council does not have the authority or the discretion to mess with reassessment and assessed values. So I just want to make that clear. So if somebody comes up here and says, my tax bill went up, y'all raised my taxes. No, we didn't. Your property probably increased in value based on reassessment. And if somebody comes in and says, thank you for lowering my taxes, but we didn't adjust the millage, we didn't change the budget. You're welcome, but we didn't do it. Your property went down in value. Sorry about that. So I think we just need to be very clear
And
with
our
the.
reassessment numbers are going to be based on 12/31/20,
Correct.
not 21, 20.
So it won't be
Thank
during
you.
this crazy.
Because we delayed the year.
And I think if you go back, I've been part of the reassessment, there's a lot of us up here when that initial one came in, and a lot of the assessments were lowered. And, that was one of those things that we had to look at and make an adjustment. You didn't necessarily change people's tax bills. Honestly, a lot of them went down because of what we went through on that. So, the reassessments, if you looked at over the year, this is a requirement that we do. And, you may see a growth, that growth may come in, the next, not this one, but the next one. So, when it comes into council, then we get to make a decision on rolling back the millage. That's what we're doing. If we keep the millage the same, you're gonna realize that tax bill, instead of it, staying the same, may go up $4 or $5 strictly because that value, or it may go up $8. But, I hear the word low taxes thrown around, and that doesn't really truly have a meaning. Making sure that we want your property to go up, because that means the county's doing a good job. If your home value's going down, then you should be up here in front of us. If everybody's home value goes down in Oconee County, we're not doing our job. And the county's not doing its job, because the unemployment is probably extremely high. There's a lot of things that come into there, but with where we're headed at now, and what I'm seeing people selling their house for, just like Mr. Elliott just said, it's unbelievable. And that is because of what's going on in America, but it's also because there's counties in this state that are not experiencing what we're experiencing. That they're moving here, they're moving to Greenville, they're moving to Anderson, because of jobs and because of quality of life. So, as we move forward with that, you're jumping way far in the future, trying to think through, hey, what's this gonna be on the reassessment? But, last year, there was a statement made, we wanna just do the budget from, I don't know, is it 2020? I can't remember what was that motion, Ms. Brock? There was
the same as the
same
prior
as
year, which was
whatever
the same
it
as the
was.
prior year.
Yeah, and so, if we're headed in that direction, then this is the time to talk about that. If we're, is the budget going to increase? Well, we got a lot of things sitting in front of us. You're pretty much guaranteed for the budget to increase. But we're sitting here saying we're working within, the means of what we have. We're working within the growth of this county. So, whatever is gonna happen, this is the time to talk about this stuff. This is the time to say, no, we want the budget to be $50 million. Okay, well, if that's the case, then we'll create a budget within $50 million if that's what council wants. But that's, what you're seeing in front of you is going to show the budget is gonna be larger. But it should be captured in the growth that what we're trending to.
Mr. Chairman. Are we at a stopping point?
A 5-minute break, right?
I will make a motion for a break, yes.
Second.
Okay, so it's 10:29, we'll resume at 10:35, 6 minutes, okay?
All in favor?
Thank you.
Sorry. I'm chatting to Kathy this morning.
All in favor? Aye. Let's see, so are we ready to move on to the next?
Let me say one more thing. We kind of went in circles here for a minute. I just want to clarify what Mr. Elliott is saying. Regardless of the calculations or however it is, he's made a commitment, and I fully agree with him on it, that a resident who does not sell or change their property, the amount of money they pay is not going to increase. I interpret that correct.
Right, and Ms. Brock and I talked about that, and she fully understands that.
And that is the full intent of the current budget that we are discussing now.
But if their property increases in value through reassessment, will that not have an impact?
It will, but when the
Their tax
assessment,
bill will increase.
so when the assessment period comes, as Ms. Hubbard explained, you take the value and then you take your prior year's value and your growth, and then there's an adjustment measure. I don't know the auditor word for that, but there is an adjustment measure for that, and council will have that opportunity in September, once she runs the calculations for the new values, because the values will not be determined until after this budget is already approved.
Yes, I also clarified, Ms. Hubbard, she's on the same page, that she understands that what the goal is. And,
Yes.
and so, based on what they think or estimate, we should be able to do what Mr. Durham and I want to do.
And just for clarification, as I said, and Ms. Hubbard had to leave, we have worked together for weeks and weeks on what we believe the value of the mill will be going forward. And of course, that is an ever-moving number, depending on property transfers, property improvements, new construction, growth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of moving parts to that. And even with the number that we're operating on for our estimation, it is still very conservative to the number that she gave me that I could work with. We're being very conservative. So in September, when that time comes and we start to take that prior year value over current year growth and the median in between then, council has an opportunity to establish the mill based on the current operating budget without an increase whatsoever.
I understand that, but my concern, and I'm not trying to, I still don't think we're all on the same page here. If one house is reassessed, it started at 100,000. There's two houses, both assessed currently at 100,000. One goes up 5% value, so its new assessed value is 105,000. The other house goes up $15,000, 15%, and it's now reassessed at 115,000. Their tax bills are gonna be different, regardless of what we establish the millage at, right?
That is possible, yes.
And that's what just wanna make sure that everybody knows that that can happen. But council cannot go in and tweak each individual property owners, because not all houses or real estate appreciates or depreciates at the same rate generally in the county. Lake property is gonna probably appreciate more than interior lots, I assume. I'm just saying.
Well, that's what the appeal process is for. If
Well,
you disagree
if you disagree with it, sure.
If you disagree
Absolutely.
with the way your home is assessed, that's what the appeal process is for. And it's very simple, and, you know, we do, as we go into this, it's probably another thing we need to make sure to continue to promote, which we did the last time. If you have an issue with that, here, it's very easy on the website to click reassessment details and how to appeal. And I know we did that last
We did.
time, so.
And I'm pretty infamous for carrying around appeal forms in my purse in case I see somebody in the grocery store or at a soccer game or whatnot. Because typically, it's not something people think of from 8:30 to 5. It's, and remember this process, you know, you're gonna get your house valuation, your assessed valuation report before you ever receive any kind of bill whatsoever. And you have an appeal process there as well. So, I'm sorry.
Any questions?
I was worried that we weren't gonna get anywhere. So I'm asking for some direction for the percent of cost of living for council consideration for potential inclusion in our working budget document.
So tell me again, what is Anderson County and Pickens County doing?
5.6% and 6%. Municipality here inside of Oconee County is 8% proposed, Another municipality was 5.5%, and the third municipality that I spoke with was 6%.
So your 6% would be right in there with Anderson and Pickens.
It is.
We can always take it down to 5 if that works within what council feels, right? So,
We'd prefer not, frankly. I just feel like this is a vital time. We are hemorrhaging our employee retention.
So is there a motion to direct Mr. Brock to use the 6% and develop a proposed budget?
so moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Here again, this can be changed. But this is just the direction to put the budget, proposed budget in, right?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Dermott mentioned the sheriff's salary being far lower than his peers in similar ways, in the same class of counties. I think it's the 50 to 100,000 is what the SC Association of Counties wage and salary report, I think that's the classification that our county's in. I think it would be appropriate to maybe even look at doing excluding our elected official or elected officials from that and taking an average for every elected official, including county council. I'm not gonna be here. But I'll tell you what, $8,000 a year is a substantial hardship if you are a small business owner. And I've spent probably 20 plus hours this week working on county issues. And that's not uncommon. And when I'm not working, there's no revenue coming in the company. I don't work for a big business. I work for myself and my clients. And if the intent of council is to make sure that we keep self-employed people off of county council, then I say keep the salary for $8,000 a year where it is. But if you want different people, different demographics to serve on this council, and even consider, you got to raise this, and I'm saying exclude Oconee County from the average wage and salary reports of the same size counties in the same class. And I would say to do that for all elected officials. Let's make sure that people are receiving some sort of value back. Because I love this county.
So
And I've given a lot of time for this county, but I have lost a lot of money in serving in this role. And I don't mean, a few $100s. I've lost tens of thousands of dollars. So, I'm just saying,
So is that something y'all could put together?
Absolutely.
Just for all elected officials?
Absolutely, I can.
In the salary range, and I guess the South Carolina Association of Counties puts the
And
salary.
that will be included in that executive session discussion.
Yes.
So that the executive session discussion will occur before we have the first budget book printed. So the decision coming from executive session can be incorporated into that budget. Is that correct?
yes.
Yes. Okay.
And if current council members, I don't know if they can legally even take a salary,
They
give
can't, but I did
themselves.
request it a few years ago, and it didn't make it past round one, so.
But if they
I
could-
do believe that council should be paying more.
They can certainly donate that to any charity of their choosing, especially the charity that Mr. McCall set up, for tax relief, so. Anyway, thank you, Mr.
Absolutely.
Chair. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure before we move too far ahead that was included.
I was just speaking to that, Mr. Chairman, if I may, real quickly. So y'all can vote on an increase in council salary, and you can take it, it just wouldn't be effective until at least 2 new folks have started their term. So next election cycle, 2 people get sworn in at that point in time. I just want to make sure that timeline was clear as the county council.
You talking about, because we got 2 positions up for re-election now. So would it be effective next year, or would it be effective after 2 more?
No. It'd be effective once 2 new folks took their seat, their term.
So not re-elected, it has to be a
Well,
turnover?
it wouldn't make any sense for not reelected. I believe it's just because it's terms.
Yeah.
They consider every term
Okay.
individual, so yeah, if Mr. Elliott were to be reelected, that term would be a new term, so it could be implemented then with the District 3 representative.
Okay.
I can do that on the next executive session, and upon direction from there. If we want to go ahead and start moving that direction for budget purposes, then we can take it out easier than we can add to.
Chair.
Yes.
Since you're making a motion about 6%, I got an email from, one of the employees, and they said that they would love to have a 4% raise, at least a 4% raise.
Email them back and tell them you're working on it.
You
Well,
said at least, right?
I think they probably know it.
Thank you.
So we've got
We
a,
do have a motion and a second on
Second.
that one.
any other discussion on percent increase?
I just want to be clear, as council, if you, I know this is not first reading, but if we go through with this, you've got a lot of people that you're committing to. So
Well, they've already heard the discussion.
I know, that's what I'm just saying, I just want to be clear as we move forward, it's not, go back to the 2012 budget or whatever that motion was, that you have to look at it to go, we've got to work within what the taxes that we collect are, and we have to, it's not a tax increase, we're very clear on that, everybody up here agrees, but I just want to be very clear as we move forward, that this is part of the budget process. But if you're gonna say 6% now, you better be committed to the 6%. We're not committed to it.
Let me ask the question, what if you're not committed to the 6%?
Well, this is your time.
Then you vote no on this.
Okay, that's what I'm doing, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I just missed it. Was there a second?
Mr.
Okay,
Kane.
Okay, sorry. That is-
And so, any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Me.
All right.
And one
next.
more regarding the salaries, and I'm really sorry, this one should be simple. We previously discussed this, I looped it in, I think Mr. Durham said it best, we went in a circle. But it's related to the sheriff's office and the starting pay. I did not include that in the 6% because the 6% was a calculation that was distributed equally across the board. The increase is specific for the sheriff's office. Our estimation is $239,273. And that does allow for the sheriff's discretion in eliminating compression that could happen within the ranks due to the bottom line coming up and there being compression in the center. We did have a motion and a second, but I did not get a vote on that. Mr. Durham, you made the motion. Mr. Hart, you made the second. I didn't make any note on that. I
Did we not vote on
apologize. Are we good to include that? I felt like we were.
Okay.
I just want to make sure.
All in favor?
I appreciate that. I'm so sorry if I didn't get it and you did in fact vote on it. Okay, sewer expansion. I'm gonna talk real fast, Mr. Hart. Okay, we're currently working on cost estimation for engineering and potential expansion opportunities at Exit 4. Simultaneously, we were asked by the sewer authority to work in partnership with them, or the sewer authority was asked to provide cost estimates for the expansion of sewer going north on Highway 11 from Exit 1. As you all know, we discussed in our pre-budget workshop, we do have designated millage in economic development. We do have approximately $3.7 million in that fund balance. This estimation is for the construction. What we'd like direction for is for us to start doing the feasibility and engineering for this specific on Highway 11 north of 85. So everything south of 85, as you know, is in the Sanctuary Point State PRT land. And because that lease is still active, we wouldn't have a plan for the portion that's in the green crosshatch area because we can't yet, or we can't. But everything that's highlighted in this red area would be part of the expansion going north on Highway 11. As you know, we are currently still working on some plans for Exit 4 area, for expansion there, but we figured we might as well strike while the fire was hot, get the pricing in order for that, to do that, and just sort of get council's blessing so that we can start moving forward. And if we have funding for that, whether that be ARPA or economic development money, none of that can be expended before we have a plan in engineering anyway.
Is this just a preliminary plan that we're looking at right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
What we would like is your direction for us to start considerations for a cost in engineering and survey, basin survey. You know, the sewer authority is currently working on the Exit 1 and 2 basin study. This should run concurrently with that study so that we have some sort of integrity to the amount of information that we can bring together to the table to make a more cohesive plan, rather than doing a basin study on one side, an engineering study on another side, and then a PER on the other side. This is a time for collaboration, and it would only make sense for us to start working on these things simultaneously as a basin study is underway.
Make a motion to approve the request.
Second.
Any discussion? Start.
Yes. According to this red, it does not reach my property. Do I need to recuse myself because I have property on Exit 1?
I think that's a question for Mr. Root. Sorry, I didn't even do a property search on that.
I think for purposes here to get it in the proposed budget to be considered, and plus, there's gonna be a lot of other people potentially benefited by it. I don't see a problem with you voting now.
Okay.
If it comes up during, in a particular way during a council meeting on approving the budget, then we can address it.
Well, this proposed red does not make it to my property. I mean, my property is on up the road from this.
I would like to state for the record that this is just a conceptual on what area would be covered, and there's no intent whatsoever to include or exclude anyone. But in fact, should this go out for design engineering, the parameter of the red area may be expanded or smaller. This was just a conceptual. I just want to be clear there that it could be a footprint bigger, it could be a footprint smaller, it could be 20 feet wider, it could be 40 feet narrower. This was just the particular basin that we were looking at.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Thank you so
I
much.
did vote on that, I'm sorry. I'm back
You
over here in
good?
the
Okay.
corner.
Okay, our solid waste facility improvements, and there's two parts of this discussion. One is the MSW tipping fees that we have a carryover conversation left from last Tuesday night. And then one is the capital improvements that we discussed at a previous, was that at the same meeting, actually? No, that was for a follow-up from Burlington Compactors.
So on the tipping fees, we received some information, I guess, in the last day or two. I don't know if everybody looked at it.
I have that information again.
But I guess one of the points that was made is if we did away with the tipping fees altogether, then there would be no encouragement for recycling. And I would hate to undo all the work that Wayne McCall did on recycling. So I think we should reduce the tipping fees, but maybe by 25% to help them out, especially because they're suffering because
This is the
of
same one that you had.
the fuel prices. But to do away with them would discourage people from recycling, and we've got to have people do more recycling and not less recycling.
This is the same one that was emailed to you, so it's old hat. Nothing new on the page. We just want to say, we can work with anything that council directs us to do. If that means lowering or waiving tipping fees for small haulers so that the impacts to the community are a greater area of service, we can work those numbers into the budget. We just want to make sure that it's understood that if we do for some, then we must do, or should do, rather, for all. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we, in we meaning solid waste staff and me, research all of the potential companies that would be impacted, and that is this list here.
So the email that was sent out, I believe said if we did away with all, it would be around $2 million, his estimate.
So that's inclusive of everything.
That's-
That was
that's
the
commercial,
absolute
industrial.
worst case scenario, yes.
Okay. So we're
Yes.
talking about then what was it, 500?
If it was small haulers
Yeah.
and what we consider cash customers only, that number, our estimation for the first year is $175,000. This is the attachment on the email. You'll see within the body of the email, I think it's 165. We put $10,000 in there as a cushion because it's a guesstimate. And it's complicated, obviously, everything is, I don't know why, it's some sort of news. So having the municipalities increased interest in serving sanitation outside the city limits does put the small haulers at a disadvantage. Now, the municipalities feel like, I guess, when they run water, or if you're on a certain municipality's water, then you are able to pick up this extra service that the city provides, because the city is providing you water service. So they do have a billing mechanism to do so. I think the city's rate, the highest city rate that I found in calling the 3 municipalities was $27 per month. I don't know what the average is. The lowest I found was $24.75 a month. And they don't pay tipping fees, as we previously discussed. Now, there could be a discussion on having the cities pay tipping fees, but I don't know that that's a viable option for this council to consider without it being a political catastrophe, and I'm just being 100% honest with you there. The cities have been reliant on their ability to dispose of their waste at no cost since the 70s, I think, when we still had separate solid waste facilities. We built the transfer station in 1998, and all municipalities do have the luxury of providing their citizens garbage pickup at a cost to the citizen. It is a service cost. But they don't have to pay for that. Cities also don't pay for landfill usage. Some of the cities that pick up outside of city limits have the ability to go geographically further than other cities because of the extension of their water lines. Like the city of Seneca has higher density areas outside their city limits, but the cities of Walhalla and Westminster don't have that same density outside of their city limits. So in order for them to make the revenue that their budgets project, they have to go further and further, which does impact the small haulers' ability to be competitive.
But it's not like those budgets, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
It's not like those budgets are just imagined up, or actually they are. You know, if certain municipalities are building budgets based on competing in the unincorporated areas with small businesses, I disagree with their philosophy on how to balance their budget. And
So one of the city administrators told me that the driver for their customer base, that have never knocked on a door, and that is a quote, we've never knocked on a door. The driver for their expansion in their customer base was citizen request driven. That someone calls and says, hey, can y'all pick up our trash? Because they've seen a certain municipal garbage can on the curb. So I don't know if that budget number is just for the providing of services as requested, or if it's, if there's a recruitment, hey, we can make money if we go and do this.
Mr. Chairman. So the way I look at it, so I live in Mountain Rest. Now, I doubt anybody's gonna take a trip up there to pick up my trash, but the taxes that I pay covers the cost for me to take my garbage, household garbage, give it to Bird at the convenience center, and then a county truck come pick it up and take it to the transfer station. Now, if somebody wanna come pick up my trash, and I wanna pay them a fee, if they'll charge a tipping fee, that business isn't paying that fee, it's getting transferred on to me, the customer that's buying it. But yet I've already paid taxes to have that service provided. Except for if a hauler is picking up, it's skipping one step in that process and going straight to the transfer station. And that's no different if it's a city resident on, a city service. I mean, the county taxes has already covered that cost, except for one step in the process, it gets skipped by the city picking it up and taking it to the transfer station.
Yeah, so I view the hauling cost almost as like a convenience cost,
And if,
since all users, now, they say that businesses don't use convenience centers, but I think small home-based businesses have a right, and most of the time a utility, to use the convenience centers, and they're always free. But like even, I live inside the city limits, I have to pay for my garbage to be picked up.
right, and if you
And
charge
I
the,
can't say no.
and if you charge the city a tipping fee, that's just gonna get passed on to those same customers again, The city's not gonna eat the fee, the citizens are.
Well, there is a cost of doing business and a cost of convenience, and, when you start talking about fees, that's the careful thing that we have to consider is, I'm all for, cutting whatever we're charging per ton for that, but from running a small business, there's all kinds of fees associated with it. You buy a building that you're making an investment in not only in your business, but for your customers as well, and you're hauling stuff off and you're charged a fee to go into the solid waste. But I'm okay with that because it's a cost associated with business, and it's a very low cost that I'm appreciative, number one, to actually have the service. Trash is always something that every county is gonna have, but to have the C&D landfill like we have and for it to operate like that, I'm in favor of charging of that because I feel like it's, if I take it from my home, I'm charged this. If I say it's from my business, I'm charged, I don't know, whatever it is, $7, $8 a ton or something. So, but that's a cost of doing business. Now, how is that passed down? Well, that's a loss out of me, so, yeah, it's distributed among a lot of people, so, but that comes into a lot of the things that the cities are doing, or that we do. There's a cost associated to running these things, but as you can see, and I think Ms. Brock brought up a very valid point, these groups are in business because this is profitable. However, I do feel like there is the cost associated with what they're doing. We need to look at the expansion of these businesses, and that's great to see, that them continuing to expand, because there's a need to it. There's a need for our citizens. So we're helping to grow small businesses, and I think that's kind of with this is a small business that is destined, especially like you said, out Mountain Rest in Oakway, man, there's no trash pickup out there. It never will be. There'll never be a city they'll ever, I don't want the city to even come out there, but anyway, so it's good to have these programs and these businesses to come out there and do that. So if we can help assist that, it'd be nice if everybody had trash pickup. It would help so many problems that I've been involved with, because it's affordable, as long as we keep it affordable. So that's kind of where I'm at. What is the affordable cost? What is the right cost? If it's waiving, what is the repercussions? Where's that cost gonna go? Because I guess we're dependent on this money to operate solid waste as it is right now, correct? I mean, not solely dependent, but I'm just saying this part of the
It does contribute to the
budget.
operational costs and the offsetting of increased taxes.
Right.
The other thing that dropping all the fees, and I'm not against dropping all the fees, I just want to put the complexity and the issues on the table so that we can take things into consideration. Is if we dropped all the fees using the transfer station,
Are you referring just to household garbage, or are you referring to all fees?
Household.
just for
household
household,
garbage.
residential household garbage that paying customers currently bring. So if you look on the sheet, I gave you glasses back on. The residential waste paid is that top line. No, we're not discussing any of the commercial or industrial. And then your residential waste haulers. If you look at them, most of them have increased their tonnages by at least a third. And that's in 3 years, which is great. That means small business is growing.
More people are recycling less.
What we don't really want to see is a free-for-all at the transfer station, because the solid waste complex one isn't meant for regular consumers or citizens. The dropping of fees would mean that, one, it would be so competitive that we may attract additional waste haulers to the area, and then we start to lose control over how much garbage is on the floor in the transfer station at any specific time. We are permitted for 350 tons per day. There are oftentimes we are over that tonnage limit we're probably over as we speak. Thursdays and Fridays are very busy days. Mondays are hectic. By having the convenience centers and us having the extra containers to provide us an option to put the garbage on the top of the hill rather than in the transfer station at the time we're in excess of our current permit, we've given ourselves the ability to maneuver the garbage and equalize it out throughout the course of the number of transfer trucks that are going to R&D and Tony. Again, I am not opposed to any of this, I just want to put the complexity. Should we be open to free, which means we don't, and it's not that we want to control them, but right now, we know the routes, we know what days they're coming, we basically know their anticipated tonnages, because obviously we pull the records and look at the data. And you'll see a couple of your small haulers here hauling the same as municipalities, which is great. That means their business is a viable business. But when we open it up to all the small haulers, I don't know what I did with my papers now. Here, this whole stack of people, we are putting ourselves in a position to not be able to control what's sitting on the floor at the transfer station at any specific time, which may require us to have an additional person, or an open top container potentially. But if they're in a compactor truck, obviously they can't dump into an open top container, because an open top container would be, an elevated container. Where at the transfer station, they can dump directly onto a high PSI concrete floor. And then that trash is then put into a hopper, which is then loaded into an 18-wheeler. So we may have to have an additional person out there, depending on the timing and shift of when that MSW is coming in. We currently operate with only 2 people in the transfer station and adequately manage more than 40,000 tons per year. Again, I'm not opposed to it, but the same was with the wage thing. I want to make sure that the council understands and that there are opportunities for open dialogue about some of and it's not that we won't work through it. We can work through anything. All we have to do is learn how to adjust. But the first 2 months, 3 months may not be perfect. And we may come back to you in 6 months and say, hey, we actually might need to build a concrete wall so that we can put a hopper down or when we're over tonnage anyway. Because Anderson County does not have a transfer station any longer. DHEC requires us to take out of county waste now, which did not used to be the case. So all the construction and all the student housing in Clemson, about 90% of that is coming to our transfer station by Republic or Allied. And maybe some of these small haulers. We don't have a provision on any of the smaller haulers that they haul only Oconee County garbage. We know for a fact at least 2 of them go to Anderson and Pickens counties for their routes. And with those waiving of fees, not only would we be accepting county waste at a free or reduced cost, but we would be accepting out of county waste at a free or reduced cost.
Yeah, but is that economical for them to pay diesel fuel to pick up garbage in Pickens and drive all the way to Oconee?
They're already doing it, but
I can't say to their side, which is why I was happy that they came the other night.
So Anderson and Pickens are getting a deal here.
I don't know how many tons, because when, like a garbage truck, say, Allied Waste, like if there's a driver, his name is Buddha. when he picks up the waste, Mr. Elliott, please don't take this the wrong way, he don't care where it comes from. His job is to pick up the can, dump it into his truck, get to the transfer station, empty that truck, go get another
Oh, I'm
can.
not talking about the hauler, I'm talking about the counties.
Yes,
Anderson and Pickens are getting a deal, and we're getting,
we're still paying for the transfer of waste
Yeah.
Of
through
their
R
waste.
and
of
B
their waste.
to the waste management, right? Yes,
So
correct.
The solution is to charge more for out-of-county waste.
But it would be impossible for those truck drivers, like how would we determine? So if Allied Waste picks up a container on the other side of the bridge at Cherry Road, say he picks up from, that side of campus on Cherry Road, and then he stops at High Point, Point West. That truck does not have scales,
But they've got a customer list.
but they're picking up in county and out of county on the same route.
Same truck, right?
Correct.
So they're mixing it all.
But there's gonna be an average per customer across the, like, all right, so you can build a data set and say, all right, how many customers did you have in 2021?
They don't
I
know,
had a-
because when I say High Point, Point West, it's not the number of customers, it's a complex.
How many cans are there? Somebody might have a trash can full with bags on top, somebody's might be empty, or they didn't take it out that day, but they know how many they're serving. So, if they tell us, if they're honest, they have to be honest. You know,
We have tried the honor system at the landfill, sir, and let me just say that we don't have many miserable failures, but that was one of them.
Well, the only way, in my opinion, to crack this nut is to figure out, and they're gonna, I would want this to be truly an application process where they sign an affidavit saying they're being honest on penalty of perjury or whatever. Just like you're filling out a tax return. And they're saying, yes, I am, this is how many customers I have in Pickens County. That's
Your
10%
big
of
haulers
my,
won't know that, your big hauler. And sometimes, we know where the county lines are because we work in county government.
who won't know that?
Your big haulers.
Of course they will. How do they know where the address is? How do they know where to pick up the garbage?
The addresses are not, I don't live in Wahala, Oconee County, I live in Wahala. So address points may not matter to them. Because when you're talking about Waste Management and Allied and Republic, those guys don't live here, those companies aren't here. They're coming from Boiling Springs.
Right, but
They don't know when they cross the county line and probably don't care.
well, but somebody can figure that out, and I would say they need to figure that out. If they want to bring other counties' waste into our county, they need to know, we need to know, and we need to charge them for that. Because we're subsidizing, and I love our friends over in Pickens and Anderson County, but our taxpayers do not need to subsidize.
Sir, we do charge them tipping fees to cover that expense.
I know, but we don't need to charge in-county residents for household garbage because they're already paying that. They can go to the convenience center right now, free of charge. We shouldn't add a additional cost onto them in tipping fees for in-county garbage. My opinion. I don't think we're adding any value.
Okay.
That's my opinion. What value is the county adding? Then that's not even mentioning the fact that there are competitors, municipalities, that are not charged that tipping fee, that are competing with them. That's a whole nother philosophical problem I have. But I'm just saying from
Right.
a revenue versus cost benefit analysis, we're not providing a value to these taxpayers on that, on this particular residential waste produced in Oconee County.
That's why we're here.
And that's
We're
why, and
getting
that's all I'm
direction
saying.
from council.
That's my opinion on this.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
so we're not the only county or community with this issue, so we need to find out somebody else and benchmark what they're doing and how they solve this problem.
And to that point, this is just really peeling back a little bit
It is.
of the solid waste issues we have in this county. I've spoken for hours with Ms. Brock about this issue. We have a bunch of tires here. We don't have enough recycling being done. And you remember when I was saying years and years ago, and you campaigned on it, Mr. Kane wants to charge y'all to throw away your trash. No, but I want people to recycle. I want everybody to recycle. I know it's a pain in the butt, but it is costing, a solid waste budget is massive in this county, and it's gonna get bigger as we grow. And we have got, when is that?
Next year.
Next year, Homer, Georgia has the opportunity to increase our contracted tip-in fees with them over there.
And guess what they'll do?
It'll probably go up. I doubt it's gonna go down.
So we're capped right now, but once that
That's
contract
waste
renewal
management,
comes
right?
up, that cap.
Is it
may not
waste
exist.
management?
It's waste management, right?
It is,
Yeah,
R&B.
yeah, they'll go up.
We need a
So
comprehensive
for our
solid waste.
solid waste numbers, specific to budget, and I'm sorry, I don't wanna cut the conversation short, but I wanna make sure that we cover all of our bases.
Yeah.
And we can always bring items back up for rediscussion, but I do know that there is a groundbreaking. I certainly wanna be, courteous of your time. We can reduce the number in the budget for anticipated revenues if y'all like to waive fees. Now, if we waive fees, I really like to say, okay, let's waive them provisionally for X number of time, or let's waive, we cut it by 50%. 50% reduction in fee takes it to $30 a ton, which is like 2004 prices. So we still, whether we take that cost away from the small hauler, it's still a burden, it's still sitting on the shoulders of the taxpayer in a way, because the cost for R&B still has to be paid by someone. So it's like, it's a very difficult, when you said peeling this back, it is like an onion in a lot of ways. And solid waste has not had a holistic, comprehensive study and evaluation done. I really like the idea of looking at other counties, because solid waste is an issue for most counties in South Carolina, because it's just not economical. Counties do have landfills, have an advantage, but those landfills are being bought very quickly by private industry, because, and waste management is one of the big ones, because it can be lucrative to own the landfill, because you have so many of them and can utilize the leverage of having just an efficiency of numbers.
It's a monopoly, is what it
And
is.
charge and charge and charge.
Yep.
Not that somebody heard that, we're not selling the landfill. Just want to make sure. Not selling the landfill.
So the last time we did talk with Waste Management, their recommended tipping fee for our transfer station was 85 a ton. And literally, we're all like, no. So there are some tax dollar subsidies to it, but could you imagine if we went by the recommendation?
Oh, yeah.
So what is our motion for Ms. Brock?
50% reduction
And that would be just for the proposed
for
budget?
household, residential, waste, household garbage.
It's still double taxation for the county residents.
We'll make another motion.
I mean, I'd make a motion to drop it.
Drop
For
it.
residential, but we need to have a solution. And maybe maybe the association of counties have data for somebody, I don't know, but we need to reach out and benchmark.
By the association.
You are paying for the convenience though. You have to.
Will you pay that hauler for the convenience for them to
I
come
don't
pick it
have
up?
to pay, I don't have to pay them to come pick up my trash if I decide to take it myself, and there's no charge to that, but I see both sides to it.
You're double paying the county for service you've already paid for. The convenience charge comes in when you pay someone else to come pick it up from you.
We would be effectively spreading the lost revenue, so increasing the cost on taxpayers theoretically across the whole county.
For those
Rather
that-
than just the ones that are choosing to utilize a private hauler.
In a business, in the business.
Or people utilizing a private hauler is reducing costs on everybody else by skipping a step in the process.
Although, to Amanda's point, it's gonna hurt our efficiency and our ability to smooth demand at
It may
the,
not, but it has the potential to.
okay,
Thank you.
which may require additional upgrades there with a, garbage truck having to back up and dump into a thing, or hiring another employee to load off the floor into a container.
But you're saying reduce efficiency if the demand picks up for private haulers which in the end, if we're doing with hypotheticals, we hypothetically reduce strain on the convenience centers.
Well, that hypothetical is based on your tonnage data here.
Yeah.
Our tonnages have gone from 2,300 tons in FY '19 to 4,800 tons, or 4731.
I second
So we know the
Mr.
increase
Davis's
in
motion.
tonnage.
Any discussion on Mr. Davis's motion?
What was the motion? I mean, 50%?
Reduction.
How much?
50% reduction in the cost per ton. My thing is, we gotta start somewhere. This is a good start. That way, because if you go to zero and then you're gonna go back and start charging, it's easier to see what the issue, for me, to see the budget. And if the budget allows zero, then I would support a zero. Like I said, I just think that's.
This is direction for Ms. Brockton to go in, we can change it.
Okay, I got you.
I would say, back to the way we've been approaching this, is putting in worst-case scenario numbers into the budget. 6% raise instead of a 5% raise. All of these proposed positions instead of just a few of them. I would say, if we're going that way, let's make it worst-case scenario, which is a 100% cut in the local residential Oconee County produced residential garbage.
I won't be able to come up with that number
But we,
for budget purposes. It'll take us a year to make that number.
well, we need to be, I think we need to be focused on charging out of county.
We do charge out of county.
What's that?
We do charge out of county,
For residential?
yes.
Okay, we need to keep doing that. I just don't want to charge for in-county residential, because we're not adding any value.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so
And
I
make
have a
it-
motion
that's-
by Mr. Davis at 50%, seconded by Mr. Elliott. I have a motion from
So,
Mr.
are you gonna amend the motion?
Well, I can't amend his motion. I would ask him to amend his
So
motion.
Mr. Durham's
So
motion
let's
is
tie
0%
let's tie my motion in line with what Mr. Kane's saying.
for
Well,
zero residential.
We have to
So
vote
that
on,
would be-
we have to vote on, Mr.
Mr. Chairman,
Davis,
if I
yes.
could, so Mr. Davis has a motion on the floor for 50% reduction. It was seconded by you.
Correct.
But Mr. Durham and Mr. Kane are speaking to, haven't really been a motion yet, but they could make a motion to amend Mr. Davis's motion
Oh, okay.
to take it down to 0%. That sounds like,
Mr. Durham made a motion for zero.
it wasn't a motion to amend, it was his
Oh, no,
different
no,
take
correct.
on it.
Separate motion.
So the motion to amend Mr. Davis's motion, taking it down to 0%. Do you want to make that, Mr. Durham?
I'll make that for in-county residential garbage.
May I please state again, there is no way for us to track that. We may be able to derive a system of data collection, but for budgeting purposes,
Well, we estimated 175,000 from somewhere.
that estimate, sir, comes from actual cost. Your top column, far right, the actual cost for paid residential waste, whether that is in or out of, because we're required to take out of county waste. So that is a total number, $229,739.46. That's actual. That was why that's how we came up with the
So
estimation.
that would be worst case, and hopefully we can develop a plan to hold, we'll have to, like I said, benchmark other counties, how they differ.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that
Huge
that
can of
understood that that's an action.
This is the worst-case scenario. This is not saying this is what council's going
This
to
is your
approve in the
current
final
scenario,
version.
this is not
Right.
worst case.
No, I'm saying
This is your current actual
what
scenario.
Mr. Durham's, and I'll second your motion if it hasn't been seconded yet, so we get the discussion on that motion.
Okay, wait, hold on. Go ahead.
What he's proposing is worst-case scenario. There may be a point in the future, which I think we should get to, where we say, all right, ABC hauling, you have 1,000 customers. What percentage of those customers are in a county other than Oconee?
We've asked those questions now, and we don't have any arm there's no mechanism for us to make them answer us. When we
Well,
say
if
how
they
many
want-
customers do you have, they say why.
If they want to put garbage in our county, can we not make that part of an application process to have a permit to do that?
But
They
that,
have permits now.
But can we not amend
have to
that
accept
process?
out-of-county waste.
But we have to accept it, but we can charge different rates for it, right?
They don't have scales on their trucks. So if I'm driving from Clemson, say I stop in Clemson and I pick up garbage, and I drive across the river and I pick up a second container, I don't know how much they weigh until I get to the transfer station on the scales.
Sure.
So there's no way for them to know how many tons came from out of county.
I understand. What I'm saying is, say that there's 90,000 tons that come from in Oconee County in a given year, and there's 10,000 tons that come from out of county. So 10% of their garbage, it may not be on that given day, or that given load, comes from another county. So
How
we
do we know
establish,
that?
because they're gonna answer us.
if y'all ever been in the, I don't know if y'all ever been in the transfer station, but I've been in there
It doesn't
more
work that
times.
way. And the
It
honesty
is
system is not a system.
insanity. We have to be very cautious with what we do, because if we overrun the transfer station, and these guys do a good job, I mean, as you can see, I think there's 10 to 14 in the county, of getting in there, getting out of the way and moving on. But there is, we've got, I'm telling you, it's coming down to where they're gonna rate us in solid waste. It's gonna happen. I don't see it as double taxation, because I see it as a convenience fee for a business that is paid by those people. And again, if you're looking at, from a small business revenue, one thing that, whatever it is, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, that's, is that gonna be a reduction in services, or is that gonna be, I'm all for supporting small businesses, but we have to be very, very cautious that, number one, we're making sure that our county's good to run a small business, and it is. It's a lucrative business, and it's getting good, it's getting better. It's not, I'm not gonna say anybody's gonna get rich off hauling trash. And that's very clear, but they're doing a great service. But that's why I'm saying, I'm just trying to start somewhere, and that's why I made the motion at 50, so we can actually see. You make a motion at 0, which is, again, the motion that's out there as well, and we have an issue when solid waste fee comes up next year, and we're like, okay, this $150,000 loss is now a $240,000 loss, then what?
So do we have a second on the amendment?
Yes.
There's not
We
an
did.
amendment, it's just
Mr.
two,
Kane.
there's two motions.
No, it's amendment.
Recast
Oh,
it
yeah.
as an amendment. Mr. Kane seconded it.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is just discussion, and it wouldn't be perfect in line with what me and Mr. Kane's talking about, but one way is if we said we waived the fee for Oconee County garbage, we can't, you can't differentiate, but say residential trash pickup for Oconee County-based businesses. And then if you got solid waste companies coming from Spartanburg County, Greenville County, Pickens County, well, it's gonna make it more competitive for Oconee-based businesses to grow theirs and be more, I guess, competitive. So then more people would probably buy their service from them because it would be cheaper. So that could be a way of helping to not have so much out-of-county garbage coming in for free.
So a lot of our out-of-county garbage that comes in, though, comes in from Oconee County-based businesses because it's very lucrative to drive to Clemson. It's very lucrative to cross the Anderson border because you are extremely far from Anderson waste pickup and you're only 10 miles from our border. So it is lucrative for our businesses to include, especially lakefront communities that are owner-occupied, because you get the density element there.
I understand, Clemson's very dense, but city of Clemson, how far do they garbage pick up? Are they really competing?
The city of Clemson?
Yeah, are
They
these,
go, they do also the same with the water thing. I contacted them. But it is consumer driven entirely. And then some areas outside of city limits, provided that it is a multiplex, it's required. But I didn't get any fees from the city of Clemson, so I'm unsure of the economic vitality compared to private haulers.
Okay, so we're ready to vote on the amendment that Mr. Durham brought up.
Is part of that motion including charging more potentially for out-of-county based?
That was just my discussion, to see what y'all thought of that.
So your amendment is just to go to zero charge.
For residential
Residential
garbage.
waste.
Yes.
Which is worst case scenario.
And that would
It's
be
worst case
direction
scenario.
for
Yes.
staff
So
to.
we can change it, but for budget planning
Correct.
purposes.
That's the motion.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
And you still have that amended motion.
Okay, now we've got
on the
amended
floor.
motion.
So you're voting.
Any
essentially
discussion on the
Mr. Brown's
amended motion? Basically what we just voted on.
motion. Exactly, yeah.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
That was your motion.
No, it wasn't.
I think we'll be amended it for
You
you.
amended the motion.
Okay, thank you. And I really appreciate y'all taking that extra few minutes. It's so complicated, as I said the other night, I'm not normally a repetitive person, but if the solution was simple, it was hard and obvious.
So don't forget, Ms. Hubbard handed these to me. This is a breakout and reassessment, so y'all
Your last
have
page
data to
first.
study.
I'm just gonna throw it all at you. All right, let's go to the last singular page first on this one, please. I realize we got 26 minutes, so y'all pull out the portrait style page first. Since we're on the solid waste, I'll continue on that one. This document is separate from the capital requests that are on your landscape document. The reason is the discussion regarding the brown goods compactors came afterward, and I want to ensure that the capital request that y'all have in your hands, you know that this is separate from that and in addition to. So, real quick, so I think everybody on council has already agreed to the compactor brown good units so that we could find the increased efficiencies in accepting furniture, just a head nod of work there. So if y'all want to, we can just put that one aside because that one has been discussed and approved with direction for us to include it in the budget, but I wanted you to understand when you started looking at the landscape style sheet that these are the capital requests coming up for this year. We can go through these. What else do we have on the list? Do you have these? And I can put the fees on the next budget meeting.
So, Ms. Brock, you want to talk about the brown goods first?
We don't have to talk about that, I just wanted to put that out as a visual reminder that this was one of the things that came from the Law Enforcement, Public Safety, Health and Welfare Committee for us to include in the budget, and I wanted to make sure, because not everybody's on that committee, that we understood what that cost was.
Motion to include solid waste brown good units.
Let's talk about the one-time capital request versus it's such a large capital request.
Well, that's essentially what I was trying to do. This direction came in after the capital requested. So, let's move on to the one-time capital, if you're ready.
So my question on the one-time capital is, and I think Mr. Hart brought this up before I came on council, we've got 2 fire trucks on here for $750,000, I guess, in total. And I know Mr. Hart brought up one time applying for grants for new fire trucks. Is this for new fire trucks?
Yes, sir, if you'll note, at the last council meeting, we got $978,000 in grants, and that was for fire apparatus. Typically, when you're in a current grant cycle, you're ineligible for other grants. So we weighed the benefit to the citizens of Oconee County out very carefully. If you'll see, the cost for these 2 trucks is $750,000. We had a grant in our hand for $978,000, and we thought that was a better use of grant funds.
What is the grant cycle year?
If you have an open grant, then that, you are not grant eligible for anything until that closure.
Yeah.
There are several grants out there for that. I'll be 100% honest with you. Oconee County is not competitive when it comes to the fire grants because we have money in the bank. The fire grants for fire trucks typically go to counties that don't have the fund balance that we have or the operating budget that we do. because those grants are competitive. And they're
That makes
based on
sense. They help out the
who
counties.
has the least amount of money gets the most
That makes
resource.
sense. That makes sense.
So if y'all want, I'll just read down this one-time capital. I know most of this like the back of my hand. We can stop at any time. I am watching the clock very carefully for you, though. The coroner, this is second year request. His request came in after budget, started last year. This is a portable x-ray machine. It's $45,000. We actually had the opportunity to go with him for the demonstration. I'm sorry, my eye's watering really bad, which makes me. So the benefit for the coroner in having the portable x-ray machine, and this seems like a very sad and morbid thing to discuss, is that when he is on the scene of a crime, he can take this portable x-ray machine with him, and if there's a head injury, he knows it right then and there. If there's a broken leg, he knows it right then and there. We don't have to wait for the body to be loaded up, transported to the hospital, pay the hospital for the x-rays of the decedent's parts, and then wait on those x-rays to come back to us. This capital request of $45,000 would pay for itself in, I think he said 17 occasions. So for what we pay for the transportation, and we have to send the bodies now to x-ray at the hospital, and we have to wait. The other benefit for the portable x-ray, and this is terribly, terribly sad, but it's a true benefit, is that when there are remains found, we don't have to go through the long identification process of marking territory in the ground. We can actually take an x-ray machine and walk around on the ground, and where there's one part, there's probably another.
How large is the x-ray machine?
It's, comes in a briefcase that has a stand, obviously, because it's x-ray. It's got a shield behind it.
It could
so
fit
you
in his
can-
trunk of his vehicle?
Oh, yeah, you can carry it in your hand.
Okay.
Yeah, you can carry it in your hand.
Okay.
It does have all the equipment that comes with it, and the extra, it was $40,000, but the additional $5,000 is for the ability to save those files to use as forensic files later.
And the coroner would be qualified to
They
operate?
do a whole training series, and they give you the certification to operate it. We really thought that might be on a state contract, but it's not. And because of our topo, now you can use it in water, but the gentleman that brought it for us to demonstrate said that it would not be of much use in a high water or rapids. So, you know, we've had some persons missing in the Chattooga River. Thank you, Connie. It would not be a benefit for us there, simply because of the nature of the rapids and the whitewater.
So 17 instances were paid for. Roughly how many times a year does he need to have someone x-rayed?
I believe that's a better question for him. There's certain parts of the coroner's job I know inside out, and there are other parts I just don't want to know, so I don't know. I'd be happy to provide that information.
And here, this is just direction, so
Yeah.
if we could get that information,
Sure.
That'd be
Take a
great.
note. Thank you. Okay, for the communications dispatch. We recently did some software and computer upgrades in the dispatch and setting up the off-site location for the 911 communication center. This software request is $35,000, and actually it's not software, it's equipment. So it's an automatic vehicle locator for sheriff's fleet. Because there are instances and because of our terrain, where deputies are often in an area where the digital radio system is lagging and the analog radio system is having the ability to track a vehicle GPS with an identifiable automatic location is simply a safety measure. $35,000 is a small request for safety. The cameras, I wish we had put the department names.
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
is this for all the vehicles?
For all sheriff's vehicles, yes, sir.
Okay.
The 10-106-50840, the next one down, we need to label these things, by department, I'm sorry. The
Can I ask a question?
$410,000, I'm sorry.
What would it cost to add all county vehicles to that?
I have no idea.
Is there any need to do that?
No, sir.
Okay.
Most of the time now, we require employees, if they're in a county vehicle, to have their GPS on their phones, if they have county phones. It's different for deputies because they go in places we don't.
Okay.
It's different for deputies. You know, typically, we do not go to private residences at 2 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And if we do, we don't know. I don't know of any reason that we, regular county employees, not law enforcement, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The $410,000 request. So the existing camera system at the detention center is out of date. It operates on Windows 7, and we don't have an option here. We have to get a new one. This is something I wish I had known last year, but we do have a new captain over the detention center, Jeremy Chapman. And Jeremy has done, instead of coming and saying, hey, we need to fix this, we need to fix this, we need to fix this, Jeremy has done a really comprehensive evaluation of the needs of the detention center and has made a 3-year capital plan on his own. And this just happens to be one of the biggest and largest, and obviously most urgent items, since it is for the camera system and has to do with the safety of our officers and inmates inside the detention center. The fire trucks and the 2 rescue trucks, you'll see that there is a scratch through there. They did request 3. I wanted to cut one to make sure that we were being as financially responsible as possible with those funds. And again, going back to the fire trucks, Mr. Elliott, just to highlight again, typically we are not in the range for being competitive for fire trucks because of the amount of funding that we have allocated for emergency services, even through the 2.9 designated mills. Going on to page 2, you'll see in the column here, 25 and 45, your department total for IT for the continuation of cybersecurity and cyber insurance is $70,000. We don't talk a whole lot about what kind of software that is, and that's for our own good. Page 3, middle of the page, the $400,000 in the Capitol building, the $605,000 for solid waste. After I realized yesterday afternoon that the compactor units that was on your separate sheet was not included in this compactor repair, I did talk to Swain, he's very sick, this morning, to see if there was some way that we could reconfigure the $400,000 request with the $241,000 request. That's obviously a necessary request, but it may be a stretch at this time. And I don't know that we would have the time capabilities to do all the repairs, all the replacement compactors, and work on the center's ability to be able to accept brown goods while working on that second drive at the landfill. So I don't know, even if it was funded, if we just have the capabilities to get all of that done in one period of time. So that number may decrease by the time we get around to the first reviewing of the budget workbook. And the airport. This is something we put in this year's budget. We did not put enough money in this year's budget because we did not anticipate there to be a 14% increase in asphalt and paving and the construction of a parking area. This is for the long-term parking area and daily airport use. I'd really like for all of you, if you haven't, to take some time, drive around the airport, and you'll see the need for this additional parking. That concludes the capital request. I will go ahead and tell you that the operating budget, the current proposed operating budget that we have been working on for the past few weeks does include everything on this sheet at this time, even the reduction in the rescue truck. We have been extremely diligent in the evaluation of departmental requests as far as capital goes, and we made some cuts operationally. That all of these things are warranted and necessary. Unless someone-
Motion to include one-time capital vehicle requests per department as submitted.
Second.
Any discussion?
I realize this is a lot. We're just doing this for budgetary work, but purposes.
Is this whole sheet that we're voting on?
Yes.
To be included in the budget.
All in favor?
Thank y'all so much.
So this was not included in this though? Is that-
What we're probably going to do for the budget book is, I just want to give those to you separately because the one-time capital, we had already collected by the time council directed us to get the
Okay.
ground goods compactors.
Okay.
We'll probably work on the one-time capital sheet for the solid waste division and work those in while balancing out the there's no way we would get 9 compactors rewired and reinstalled in a year. I bet if we ordered them tomorrow, we won't have them by the time we're, this time next year.
Okay, so you're working in the number that we just approved?
Correct.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure y'all understood that we got the direction from that committee to be included in the budget.
Okay.
One more thing and then I'll let you all run. This is our fee schedule. There was some consideration last year for increasing fees and for requests for in-depth evaluation of fees. I realize it's 10 till, I know there's a hard stop at 12. The one thing I want to highlight in red, Mr. Haney brought forth that we were not competitive in fee schedule, that we were a little bit too low in our fee schedule for airport T-hanger rentals. So you'll see that on the first page, the 3 red things. I spoke extensively with Jeff Garrison, our airport director, over the last couple of weeks. We've done an evaluation of the condition of our hangars for one, and the age of the hangars, because the older hangars are a little bit smaller, like they won't hold a Cessna 182, but they'll hold the demands of 12. So if the wingspan of the plane can be accommodated in the smaller hangar, that increase is $15 per month. It is not a huge increase in anticipated revenue, but it puts us more in line. You'll see that the largest increase jumps from the 270 to 300. That's for the newest hangars down by the corporate end, which is the closest to Shallow. I want y'all to have a chance to look through those. Any change that you see anywhere from last year till this year for a recommended amount is in red. There are not significant changes, except for we've broken out processing for certain estates and probate. What was considered a small estate before, we've broken out individually and have removed that from estate processing, because the smaller the estate should reflect in a smaller fee. Because it should be on a sliding scale. That came from Ms. Rice, our interim. I don't think she's interim, she was our probate court judge, yes? She's not interim, is she?
I think probably, you can call the probate court judge. It's a bit
Okay.
of an odd situation.
Sorry. I know a lot of things, but interim titles. And then on the rock quarry, that is the other significant change, and that is your second to the last page. You'll see that these increases are small. It does not make us competitive with the big boys. We try not to compete with the big boys because we don't sell a wash product and they cannot use our rock on SCDOT certification roads. Obviously, we use them for county maintenance and for gravel. I know that how I'm trying to be aware and conscious of y'all's time. So anybody have any concerns, comments, anything about the fees? If you feel like the clock is ticking to the point, I'd be happy to meet with anybody one-on-one. We can pick this back up next Tuesday. Not next Tuesday, the next. Yes,
Not next Tuesday.
sorry.
You talking about council meeting?
The 5th,
Isn't that?
not next Tuesday, but the next.
Yeah.
A week from.
Yeah.
And I don't want to push anybody into a corner, but I do want to let you all know that these increases are the same things that we have been discussing. These were discussed, the T-hanger rental started last year, after the budget had already been completed, unfortunately. And then the rock quarry, that is just an increase based on market-driven and our cost to operate, because it is an enterprise fund. We tried to keep the increases at the quarry as low as possible to make sure that we weren't hurting our small and local business. and just by small incremental increases. And of course, we're facing increases just like everybody else in fuel and equipment operation and gas.
Real motion on that fee schedule.
I can, absolutely.
I'll make a motion to set the fee schedule as presented for the 22-23 budget.
For the proposed budget, right? Just,
For the,
yeah,
Yeah.
you're not approving it for the budget.
Well,
Proposed
yeah.
budget, for putting
You
together.
go
the
ahead
budget.
and leave these
Yeah,
as
yeah.
is
correct.
for
Yes.
inclusion in the budget.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Anybody else want to talk now?
So the one thing you have left on the tier one, and I don't think it's, has any dollars associated with the Utica discussion, right?
Our Utica discussion, actually, what is the last tier one? I'm sorry, I thought we already covered that. So there are several options for us to start accomplishing things in Utica. One is there is currently a small private group that is working independently as a group. Mr. Kane and I are, well, I actually haven't been the last two. It's the same one I took you to, Mr. Durbin. Mr. Hart, you're welcome to come at any time as well. So there is a drive now for there to be curbside garbage pickup in Utica. It doesn't mean that Utica's being revitalized, but it does mean that any of the properties that were currently in violation for codes for debris and garbage have now been maintained to a certain point. There's a potential for the county to enter negotiations for a real property acquisition in and around the Utica area without giving it away. That could potentially bring some affordable housing elements and or multifamily units to the Utica community, which would in turn spark a revitalization effort from both the residents and developers that are interested in watching Utica change and grow over time. I don't have a budget amount at this time for that, but I do want to say that we have funds recognized by both of us and through our economic development staff. Again, we do have the economic development millage, we have a fund balance there. And Utica is a primary place for ARPA expenditures as well. So while we don't have a budget amount that goes with that, we do have some potential funding sources that would not have an impact on the budget and processes we're creating.
Anyone else in council have any comment?
What point will we have some idea of those, just when we mentioned potential property acquisition, if we started discussions with the owner or owners, I don't know who all owns what, but then that would be something that's brought back to council. Do we need to appropriate any, designating funds, or just say that's?
Once we figure out how much it is, we'll come back to council and request that designation of funds. And if it's ARPA money, remember, it will be through 3 readings and a public hearing, so it will be crawl before you walk.
Right.
Any other discussion? All in favor to adjourn?
Is there a motion?
Did we get a motion to second?
Second.
Mr. Hart made the motion.
I figured that was a
I'll
motion.
second Mr. Hart's motion.
I made
Mr. Clark made the motion.
That's right.
All right, I'll vote against.
Thank you all so much.
I really want
appreciate it.